Chapter 1756, Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. Chapter 1756, Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. Was this not a nonsensical question? Ling Han only stared at that bell. If he was able to defeat Ding Yaolong, why did he have to declare that he would come back again in the future? He was only a first severance, and no matter how freakish he was still just a first severance. He could defeat all opponents in the second severance, and just barely matching the early stage of the third severance already made him a freak among freaks. As for the fourth severance, the gap was really too wide. As Ding Yaolong waved the bell, it released an endless black qi, and he declared, "This is called the Black Mist Bell of 10,000 Ghosts." Innumerable years ago, the ancestors of our Ding clan had already begun to refine it. However, refining this object would require the sacrifice of innumerable living souls. To avoid being erased by divine punishment, every ancestor would only refine a small portion, and after innumerable years, it has finally been refined successfully. If it was not for the fact that your potential is too frightening, despicable brat, I really would not want to expose the secret of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts yet. The black mist surged out, turning into an ocean, and multiple skulls appeared in the hazy ocean, releasing sharp cries that could easily make any severing, mundane tear bleed from all the 7 apertures. If an ordinary first severance was here, his soul would probably be separated from his physical body easily with a few waves of this bell. Tight situation, retreat! The large black dog broke into a run and fled. I will retreat first. The mission of the envoy of justice will be up to you, brat. At this moment, it did not have a sliver of seriousness left. If anyone actually trusted this large black dog, that person was definitely too naive and kind. Ling Han also leaped to the Empress's side. If there was the slightest danger, the two of them would enter into the Black Tower together. Humph! Before the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, you still think you can escape alive? Ding Yaolong asked coldly. He had summoned even this kind of top-secret weapon, so he was naturally filled with the determination to kill Ling Han. Among the ghostly wails and shrill cries, innumerable skulls pounced towards Ling Han and the Empress, each of them possessing the battle prowess of a third severance. Though it was only the third severance, just how many were there? More than 10,000. Thus, putting aside the fact that Ling Han and the Empress were only in the first severance, even if it was a fourth severance grand elder facing this kind of precious tool, he would probably only be able to flee pitifully. True, if the might of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts was not so strong, what need would there be for the ancestors of the Ding clan to refine it, undertaking the risk of sustaining divine punishment for so many generations? Mere spirits scram. Ling Han shouted loudly, releasing the 9 heavens flame. Boom! The fiery flames surged out, turning into a circle which protected himself and the Empress inside. This was effective, compelling the skulls to stay outside the circle. Yet the skulls in front would pounce, followed quickly by those behind, and when each skull collided with the circle, they would expend a portion of the flames. If this went on, it would not take long before they would be able to invade the circle. Even so, Ding Yaolong was still incredibly stunned. If it was him that was besieged by the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, the situation would definitely not be much better than what Ling Han was facing now. But who was he? This naturally was the credit of the 9 heavens flame. The ancestral flames of the heaven and earth were incredibly dominating. Unfortunately, Ling Han's cultivation level was too low, which limited the might of the 9 heavens flame. Otherwise, let alone whatever Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, even celestial kings would shiver at the sight of it. No matter how freakish this despicable brat was, he finally would not be able to escape the fate of death now. Ding Yaolong revealed a slightly twisted expression and declared, "Despicable brat, after you're dead, I will snatch away all your fated opportunities, and as for the woman beside you, I will turn into a beautiful corpse, and I am sure that a great many people would be willing to toy with her. With his identity, he should not have said such threats. But who asked Ling Han to have destroyed the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan twice, and Ding Yaolong's heart was really filled with too much hatred. If he did not say a few words at this moment, he would not be able to appease his anger even if he tore Ling Han into pieces. I never thought that you are this type of person, Ding Yaolong. The large black dog had circled back and appeared behind Ding Yaolong. It immediately aimed a bite at him. Ah! Ding Yaolong cried out in pain. He had not imagined that the large black dog would appear and disappear so suddenly, and was able to emerge behind him without any prior signs like this. This bite landed very solidly on him. In the past, when the large black dog had not yet become a celestial, Han Lu, who was similarly a fourth severance, had still sustained a harsh bite from the large black dog. And now that the large black dog had advanced into the severing mundane tier, even if Ding Yaolong was slightly stronger than Han Lu, his actual gap with the large black dog had actually shrunken many times over. This bite caused Ding Yaolong's spine to straighten suddenly, and his hips abruptly leaned forwards. See Grandpa Dog's monkey stealing peaches. The large black dog was prepared for this. It released its bite and turned around, quickly arriving in front of Ding Yaolong. Then it shot out a firm leg, harshly kicking over, and hitting directly at Ding Yaolong's raised crotch. Pa! The sound of N*TS being crushed rang out. Even if Ding Yaolong was a fourth severance grand elder, so what? This was not just having his N*TS ache, but having even his N*TS crushed. Ah! He released a sharp wail, his legs suddenly clenching tightly together, and even his face having turned pale. Grandpa Dog's last strike of the 3 consecutive moves, crippling Chrysanthemum. The large black dog circled around behind Ding Yaolong and stabbed his dog's paw straight into the latter's behind. Ah! This time, Ding Yaolong's cry was really felt with overwhelming agony. His news having sustained a severe injury, he screamed in pain once more, the misery in his voice indescribable. Success, retreat! The large black dog broke into a run and fled. Its style had always been sneak attacks and cheap tricks. As for head-on confrontation, what did that mean? Grandpa Dog had absolutely no idea. Ding Yaolong clenched his legs tightly together, one hand covering his behind, while the other was still holding onto the bell. No matter how one looked at it, this scene was really out of sorts. Ling Han couldn't help but break into raucous laughter. The large black dog's cheap tricks followed one after another. In the future, he really could not afford to be careless around it. This cunning dog made no distinction between allies and enemies. If he did not take caution and fell for one of its tricks in future, he wouldn't even have anywhere to cry. In this manner, Ding Yaolong was rendered unable to continue to spin the bell of 10,000 ghosts, and his attack dispersed by itself without Ling Han having to do anything to resolve it. Ding Yaolong! A gruff shout rang out, and the Grand Elder of the Long Clan appeared, his expression cold as ice. I did not think that your Ding clan had actually refined such a vicious evil tool in secret. No wonder the clansmen of our Long Clan would occasionally disappear. As it turned out, they had all fallen into your poisonous hands. Xiao! Another figure appeared. The Grand Elder of the Duan clan had also come. His eyes were also fixed on the bell of 10,000 ghosts menacingly. Ding Yaolong, I need an explanation from you today, he stated calmly, but an incomparable determination was clear in his tone. All of a sudden, Ding Yaolong actually became the target of a combined interrogation from 2 great fourth severance Grand Elders. These 2 were not Han Lu, but were true prodigies. The victor would be difficult to decide if it was a duel, but in a battle of 2 against 1, he would definitely be in trouble. Of course, if it really exploded into a fierce battle, he would definitely be able to inflict severe injury, or even cause death to at least one of them at the cost of his life. Ding Yaolong humphed and declared, "What do I need to explain? Get out of the way. both of you. Otherwise, I will slaughter the two of you as well. No matter what, he was definitely going to kill Ling Han today. Da-da-da. Blood was dripping from both the crotch of his trousers and behind, and accompanied by his present cold and aloof expression, the force of the impact was quite strong. Though the Grand Elders Duan and Long were both furious and filled with hate when they saw this miserable appearance of Ding Yaolong, especially when he was holding his legs tightly together as if he had been raped, their aged faces involuntarily twitched. They really wanted to laugh. Their urge to laugh was seen by Ding Yaolong, and he couldn't help but tremble in fury. Two elites of the same level were actually smiling at him. Their smiles were not of friendliness. Instead, they were laughing at him. He was very angry, no, close to exploding with fury. "All of you die!" he roared loudly, and the bell of 10,000 ghosts was used once more. Chapter 1757, A Young Soul Elite Arrives. Chapter 1757, A Young Soul Elite Arrives. The bell of 10,000 ghosts was really too terrifying. If a treasure could also be divided into a flawless severance and normal severance, then the bell of 10,000 ghosts was definitely a flawless severance, and had furthermore attained a flawless severance through striking the heaven and earth. It definitely could overwhelm all elites of the same level. Otherwise, the Ding clan would have been too foolish to pay such a great price to refine it. Thus, when the ghostly mist appeared, the Grand Elders of both the Duan and Long clan could only evade, and Ling Han and the Empress used lightning flash, similarly leaving the territory that was enshrouded by the ghostly mist. The fierce ghosts wailed shrilly, rolling about in the black mist. Those eerie screams caused a considerable effect on Ling Han and the others, causing them to bleed from their 7 apertures and also look similar to a ghost. What a frightening treasured tool! The only one who was unaffected was Ding Yaolong. He was the user of the treasured tool, so he was naturally immune to its effects. As for the large black dog, he had really run away too far, so he was unaffected as well. Ling Han's physique was strong, and his spirit had also been tempered by the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Though he was bleeding from his 7 apertures, he could still hold on. The Empress had 9 doppelgangers. In this half a year's time, she had already destroyed a few, which she had later formed again, so the attack that she sustained could be divided equally among all 10 of them, so she could bear it as well. After all, this was only a portion of the full might of the bell of 10,000 ghosts. The Grand Elders Duan and Long were still fine. Their cultivation level was still strong, and it would be too difficult for mere sound waves to inflict injury on them. Thus, though the 4 of them looked very pitiful, they were completely capable of holding on. "Take down the ringleader first!" the Grand Elders of the Duan and Long clans exclaimed softly, and charged towards Ding Yaolong. They could not continue being a submissive target like this, after all. But Ding Yaolong did not even move at all, and only summoned the black mist towards him so that it surrounded him. In this manner, if the 2 Grand Elders of the Duan and Long clan were to attack him forcibly, they would be trapped by the black mist, and that would definitely be big trouble. "You 2 old bastards, I had planned to kill the 2 of you after a few 100 million years past. But since I have already exposed the secret of the bell of 10,000 ghosts today, I will take this chance to slaughter all of you," Ding Yaolong declared coldly. The Grand Elders of the Duan and Long clan were both marveling at their luck in secret. They had not imagined that the Ding clan would actually refine such an evil treasured tool, and more importantly, they had actually refined it successfully. It should be known that the heaven and earth would bestow a punishment to erase the person who had refined this kind of evil weapon. But looking at the situation now, there seemed to be a mysterious force that was suppressing the evil of this bell of 10,000 ghosts. It was still missing a slight bit, and had yet to reach the requirement for drawing a divine punishment onto it. Thus, though the thunderclouds had formed, the divine punishment had still not descended all this while. If Ding Yaolong had taken this bell of 10,000 ghosts when they had completely no expectation of it, they definitely would have been finished. Thankfully, they knew about it now. If they knew about it, it would be fine. This was only a pseudo-celestial tool that was equivalent to the fourth severance, after all. Ding Yaolong battled two great first severance Grand Elders on his own. But not only did he force the two great Grand Elders into dodging and evading in a tizzy, he could still spare a hand to launch attacks at Ling Han and the Empress. The person he most wanted to kill was still Ling Han. If Ling Han was allowed to flee this time, the Ding clan would definitely be done for. This brat had to die. Ling Han and the Empress continued to channel and use lightning flash continuously. After advancing into the severing mundane tier, both their power and grasp of regulations had improved many folds over. Thus, they would not be tired after using lightning flash a few times. They did not retreat because Ling Han wanted to know just how powerful this evil weapon was, so he could decide when he would come charging back the next time. When he next came to the Ding clan manor, he would definitely not flee any longer. Instead, he would destroy the Ding clan entirely. Grand Elder! Just at this moment, a voice shouted out, filled with fury. Ding Song! Previously, he had headed to the Han clan and had just made his way back. The first thing he saw was that the ancestral shrine had again been ripped apart, so his fury was naturally out of bounds. He immediately spotted Ling Han, and his eyes narrowed. He instinctively thought that all this was caused by Ling Han. He really had not guessed wrongly. This person is Ling Han. There was another person next to Ding Song, dressed completely in black. There were multiple patterns that looked like spiders on his clothing, causing one to subconsciously feel disgust upon seeing them. This was a man who looked to be in his 40s. There were actually patterns on his face as well, stretching all the way to his neck, and it was probable that he had them on his chest, though they were not visible at this moment. He looked longer at the Empress's face, and an incredibly stunned expression involuntarily appeared on his face. A strong change took place in his gaze. In reply to my lord, that despicable brat is Ling Han. Ding Song hurriedly replied with utter respect. This blad-clad man's name was Han Hongfei, and he was a young soul Grand Elder of the Han clan. Dividing Soul Tier was divided into the 4 cultivation levels of Heaven Soul, Earth Soul, Yin Soul, and Yang Soul. Though Yang Soul was only the first level, the gap between severing Mundane Tier and Dividing Soul Tier was similar to the gap between Genesis Tier and severing Mundane Tier. No matter how prodigious you were, there was no way to possibly compensate for this gap. Han Hongfei reluctantly withdrew his gaze from the Empress's face. Then he looked at Ling Han and calmly stated, "You may commit suicide, and as for that girl, come here." He was completely issuing a command. This was natural. He was a Yang Soul elite, and who could be an equal match for him here? The Grand Elder of Duan clan could not help but point out, "My lord, this is Dark Moon City." Dark Moon City was under the administration of the Black Moon sect, and above the Black Moon sect was the Fu clan. No matter how one looked at it, it was not up to the Han clan to show off their military might here. "Are you threatening me?" Han Hongfei swept a cold look over the Grand Elder of the Duan clan. The aura at the level of Yang's soul rippled out, as if the heavens itself was collapsing. The Grand Elder of the Duan clan suddenly spat out blood. The difference between their cultivation levels was too huge. He could not even hold up against one look or the release of his aura. The Grand Elder of the Long clan gripped his hands into tightly clenched fists, yet only dared to keep his fury in his heart. Facing the bell of 10,000 ghosts, he could still parry and dodge, but against a Yang Soul elite, he would be dead with a single gesture of his hand. "My lord, I cannot apprehend this boy, so please help me." Ding Yaolong put the bell of 10,000 ghosts away. Since someone from the Han clan had come, who was further a Yang Soul elite, Ling Han would definitely be dead, and there was no further need for him to make any more moves. Han Hongfei only acted as if he had not heard him. Why would he need to give a mere fourth severance any regard? Without entering into Dividing Soul Tier, fourth severance was mere trash. He cast another look at Ling Han and the Empress, and a hint of impatience showed in his expression. "What are you still standing around for?" "Old bastard, has your head been kicked by a mule?" Ling Han couldn't help but throw insults. "If you want to die, then you can go and die on your own. Get fuck asterisk lost." Holy fuck. Han Hongfei was involuntarily stunned, and then flew into a thunderous rage. A first severance junior actually dared point his finger at him and insult him straight to his face? He humphed, and immediately stretched out a hand to grab at Ling Han. Hong, origin power, broad and powerful, spread out. This was the strike of a dividing soul tier, so how could anything from a severing, mundane tier compare? Even a fourth severance was far inferior. "Old bastard, you're only drawing trouble for the Han clan. I will eventually go to the Han clan and seek you out for an accounting." Ling Han threw down these words, grabbed the Empress, and entered into the Black Tower. Ultimate, invincible escape. Xiao, the two of them immediately vanished. Han Hongfei's palm strike descended and completely missed its target. Yet the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan that was initially only half destroyed completely crumbled under the strike. This was a dividing soul tier elite attack. Ding Yaolong's mouth twitched, and he felt like the ancestors of all the previous generations would probably be climbing out of their graves to find and punish him. Chapter 1758. Invitation from the Large Black Dog. Chapter 1758. Invitation from the Large Black Dog. The search for the whereabouts of Ling Han and the Empress naturally ended in failure again. And from this, Ling Han found out that at least a dividing soul tier elite was still not strong enough to discover the existence of the Black Tower, and when he thought further about it, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, too, did not show any reaction about the Black Tower. Thus, this line of safety could completely be stretched to the Immortal Palace tier. If he encountered an ascending origin tier elite, he would have to be careful. In any case, celestial kings were definitely capable of discovering the existence of the Black Tower. This was something that Small Tower had reminded him about over and over again. Han Hongfei was very furious. He, a powerful young soul Grand Elder, had made a move, and he was actually going to return empty-handed. He did not only want to apprehend Ling Han to preserve the prestige of the Han clan, but also wanted to snatch all the fated opportunities belonging to Ling Han, which very possibly could contain a celestial king technique. If it was not for the fact that the Han clan did not want to draw attention, they'd actually very much want to send an Immortal Palace tier elite over. Finally, when Han Hongfei saw the Empress, he had gained inappropriate desires as well. This kind of exquisite beauty was definitely enough to enchant anyone, and he could not control himself at all. Unfortunately, all his wishes had turned out to be moot. What could he do if he could not even find his target? Even if he was very powerful, it was completely useless. He dug 3 feet into the ground in a search, unwilling to give up the matter. He was definitely not going to believe that Ling Han was capable of using a spatial teleportation secret technique in front of him. In this manner, the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan was completely ruined. At first, the ancestral shrine could still be rebuilt and the memorial tablets could be rearranged, and then they would be able to return 18 years later as a good man. But the situation now was Han Hongfei had refined every single tile and brick into nothing. He worried that Ling Han's spatial god tool was extremely small, which would allow him to escape by passing off as rubble. Ding Yaolong's face had turned pale, and as he watched the memorial tablets of Ding so on and so forth being refined, his heart was dripping blood. The ancestors. He did not dare stop him, and his hatred for Ling Han only intensified many times over in his heart. He swore that if he had the chance, he would definitely tear Ling Han into pieces. Not only did Han Hongfei refine all the objects on the ground once over, he even removed layer after layer of the ground, right until groundwater surged out of the ground, turning the area of the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan into a lake, and only then did he reluctantly give up. He really could not find that brat. Could it be that he really had used some kind of spatial secret technique? The secret technique of a celestial king. Gasp! Immediately, his expression changed drastically, and he showed an incredibly jealous expression. There was a gap of a whole major tier, which meant 4 minor levels, between himself and Ling Han. This difference in strength was really too boundless, but he still managed to pull the wool over his eyes. This kind of secret technique was really too powerful. If he could obtain it, then wouldn't he have no need to fear, even if faced with an immortal palace-tier elite? Han Hongfei was unwilling to give up, and took residence in the Ding clan manor. In any case, Celestials had a limitless lifespan, so he could completely afford to wait. He was taking a gamble that perhaps Ling Han was still in the vicinity. That was because he had indeed not sensed any ripple in time and space. Perhaps Ling Han had only temporarily entered into a separate dimension, and that was why he could not discover his existence. With Han Hongfei keeping watch, the Duan clan and Long clan naturally did not dare mobilize troops against the Ding clan and rise in revolt about the matter of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. However, they immediately sent someone to report the issue to the Black Moon sect. In fact, if the Black Moon sect could not settle the matter, they would continue to report the matter further up the hierarchy. This kind of evil weapon definitely could not be allowed to appear. After Ling Han stayed for a few days in the Black Tower, he left quietly. He deliberately repressed his aura, and it was extremely difficult for even a Yang Soul elite to discover him unless his eyes just happened to spot him, or he was overwhelmingly close to him. Little Han come with Grandpa Dog. However, Ling Han had not walked for too long when the large black dog turned up from an unknown corner. He was standing on his hind legs and slung an arm around Ling Han's shoulders as if they were close brothers. The nose of a dog was indeed sensitive. Yet Ling Han's heart was filled with caution. This large black dog would trick everyone and anyone, and one definitely could not trust its warm attitude. Otherwise, one would definitely fall for one of its tricks without even knowing it. What? He asked casually. Grandpa Dog discovered an ancient site, and there is a considerable number of celestial medicines there. Are you interested in taking a trip with Grandpa Dog? The large black dog asked. Ling Han was filled with suspicion. If there was actually something as good as that, you actually did not think of taking it all for your own. What kind of dog do you think Grandpa Dog is? The large black Dodi had an expression of indignant fury, as if he had suffered some grave injustice. And to think that Grandpa Dog thought of you at the very first moment, yet you actually doubt me like this. Grandpa Dog must have gone blind and trusted a cruel dog like you wrongly. Pay. Ling Han's expression was filled with disdain, and he retorted, Your expression is so exaggerated, it is making me even more suspicious. The large black dog immediately came to an abrupt stop, stretched his paw into his iron underwear, and scratched. He bared his teeth in a grin. I didn't think that you would have discovered Grandpa Dog's true face so quickly. If I want to deceive you in the future, the difficulty level will increase considerably. Supporting his chin, he put on an expression of deep thought. That could not be allowed. Ling Han instantly sent a kick over. This damn dog was really despicable. All right, brat. That ancient site is slightly dangerous, and Grandpa Dog needs you to keep watch and become a hired thug. The large black dog revealed the truth as he leaped out of the way of the attack. Ling Han's expression was filled with suspicion. The large black dog definitely could not have spoken the truth so easily. However, though the large black dog was cunning, it did indeed seem like he had never truly harmed Ling Han before. Fine, I'll go. Ling Han nodded. With the help of celestial medicine, his cultivation level would advance even faster. If he could advance into the second severance, then he could easily kill any member of the Ding clan aside from Ding Yaolong himself. Even if he faced Ding Yaolong, he would not be like how he had been before, only managing to dodge and run. No matter what, he could counter at least once or twice. "I knew that you're a cunning brat, and would definitely agree," the large black dog said, grinning. The man and dog arrived at a dense forest, and the large black dog drew out multiple pieces of godly metal which it arranged on the ground, building what looked similar to a sacrificial altar. This was not godly metal, but was rather pseudo-divine metal. Ling Han couldn't help but feel envious. He really wanted to steal a few pieces for himself. He did not mind how many stars the pseudo-divine metal was, as long as he could toss them over to the divine demon, Sword to Consume. However, he immediately curiously asked, "Little Black, weren't we heading to some ancient site?" "Tui, how long do you plan on running on your 2 legs? Even if I am specialized in spatial teleportation, don't even think of reaching the place if we're not spending 10 to 15 days, the large black dog said disdainfully. "You don't understand, brat. Grandpa Dog is presently constructing a teleportation formation." Ling Han was puzzled and asked, "You actually know how to use formations?" "Of course. All those years ago, The large black dog stopped moving his paws and scratched his behind. "What did I do all those years ago? So strange. I seem to have lost a large amount of my memories." Ling Han had the same feeling. The origin of the large black dog was definitely extraordinary. When he had still been in Genesis tier, he could bite the behind of a 4th Severance, Grand Elder. Though he did not manage to inflict injury with its bite, being able to bite the latter was already an incredibly bizarre feat. Ling Han was freakish enough, right? But if it was him who had to secretly approach a 4th Severance Grand Elder and make a move on him without the latter realizing it, putting aside the fact that he was not capable of it in the Genesis tier, he could not possibly accomplish it even now. Grandpa Dog can't remember. The large black dog went nuts for a while, and then suddenly showed a wicked grin. "Come, let's go and rob that ancient site completely." The speed at which he suddenly changed attitude was completely unexpected to Ling Han. What kind of thought process was going on in his head? The large black dog arranged for a very long while, and a small-scale sacrificial altar was already built. Ling Han and he ascended it, and the latter repeated a chant. That was an incredibly dry and obscure chant, and the pronunciation was very strange. Ling Han tried to repeat it, but shockingly discovered that he actually could not remember a single letter. It was at this moment that the sacrificial altar glowed, and the light wrapped around both man and dog. Then it trembled slightly. When the light had dispersed, both Ling Han and the large black dog had disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1759, The Medicinal Garden. Chapter 1759, The Medicinal Garden. Ling Han only felt his vision blur, and he had already arrived in a forest. Though there were some similarities with the previous scenery, there were even more differences. The ground here was more yellowish, and the tree leaves were also wider and thicker, while their height was considerably lower, so sunlight could not penetrate the canopy. Ling Han raised his head, and his vision passed through the layers of leaves. He could clearly see that there was actually a sun hanging above their heads. It should be known that the celestial realm did not have any sun, and even the stars in the skies were not real stars, but merely multiple pieces of giant meteorites. "Little Han, don't glance around, and follow Grandpa Dog quickly." The large black dog moved stealthily forwards. "Don't create a slightest bit of noise." Ling Han frowned and said, "Didn't you say that this was an ancient site? We haven't even gone in yet, so why should we have to be so cautious?" "Pei, who told you that one can just simply strut right into an ancient site?" The large black dog did not even turn his head. "This ancient site has already been taken by someone, so we have to be very careful. Otherwise, we could not possibly enter." "Taken by whom?" Ling Han asked. This large black dog was indeed undependable. It had not spoken the truth, and had actually concealed such important information. Don't worry about it. Anyways, we are here to commit robbery, so who cares whom we're robbing? The large black dog retorted very irresponsibly. Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. But when he thought about the fact that ancient sites had no owner in the first place, and it was not something that would belong to you just because you discovered it first, he nodded, his heart completely unburdened as he followed the large black dog's footsteps. After walking for a while, the large black dog suddenly spluttered into laughter and said, "Brat, if Grandpa Dog farted at this moment, you'd be so extremely invigorated, wouldn't you?" Ling Han almost sent it a kick. "Little Black, your taste is really getting worse and worse." "Hee, that would have to depend on the person. I think your taste is not all that good, either, Brat." The large black dog was not willing to be outdone. They walked for a while, and the large black dog continuously sniffed around with his nose. When he arrived at some bushes, he moved the bushes aside, and there was actually a pit underneath. However, looking at its shape, it was definitely a dog's hole. Ling Han gave it a glance and asked with a strange expression, "You aren't asking me to squeeze into a dog's hole, are you?" "What's wrong with a dog's hole? Has a dog's hole offended you?" The large black dog immediately flew into a rage and opened his mouth to bite Ling Han. "Woof, you dare to look down on your grandpa dog." Ling Han drew out a chicken drumstick from his spatial god tool and stuffed it into the large black dog's mouth, blocking it in this way, and said, "Are you really reliable? Is there any such entrance into an ancient site?" "Pay, the main entrance is heavily guarded. So what can we do if we don't think of some alternative method?" The large black dog had chewed up the chicken drumstick completely in a few bites. "Do you have any more? Give me another." He had gotten addicted to the taste. "Let's deal with business first." Ling Han refused. The large black dog took the lead and squeezed into the dog's hole. He had created this hole, so it was naturally just fitting to his size. Ling Han was exasperated and could only shrink his build and began walking into the dog's hole. The dog's tunnel was extraordinarily long, and this also showed that this ancient site was extremely important. The force that had taken possession of it was guarding it very seriously, and the large black dog had to open a secret passage from very far away. After traveling for a whole 2 days, the large black dog finally stopped. The passage here had become considerably higher, so Ling Han could turn back to his original build and would not need to worry that he would be squeezed. The tunnel had reached its end, and a wall appeared ahead of them. It was very strange and looked like a painting that was capable of moving. Its color was changing continuously. "This is the protective formation of the ancient site. Just see how I will unravel it," the large black dog declared proudly. "I'm not boasting around here, but there is practically no formation that exists in this world that is capable of blocking Grandpa Dog. Come, give Grandpa Dog a hand." Ling Han was also slightly accomplished in the art of formations. Though he was not able to set up a celestial level formation at the moment, he still had the insight. Just by looking at the large black dog's proficient movements, he knew that his level of mastery over formations was indeed very high. The reason why this damn dog had learned formations in the first place had to be so that it could break into the treasuries of others, or something of the like. Guard against fire, guard against thieves, and guard against the large black dog. Brat, why are you looking at me like that?" The large black dog stared at Ling Han while his 2 front paws moved incessantly. "Nothing much. I was just considering if I should build a secret chamber or treasury or something of the sort in my residence in future," Ling Han said casually. "Then just leave that up to Grandpa Dog. I guarantee that it will be the safest treasury in the world." The large black dog was filled with self-confidence. "It is safe even against you?" Ling Han asked. "How could that be?" The large black dog scoffed. "I am the one to set up the formation, so how could it possibly be capable of blocking me?" Ling Han sighed and said, "The individual I primarily want to guard against is you." "Woof, you actually distrust me so much." The The large black dog opened his mouth, wanting to bite Ling Han. However, his paws were currently occupied, so the large black dog could only turn his head, yet he could not get near enough. It was at this moment that an opening appeared in the formation of the ancient site, which looked like a vortex. Go in quickly. Ling Han and the large black dog scrambled in at the same time. Abruptly, spiritual qi that was indescribably dense enshrouded them, causing every single pore on Ling Han's body to relax and expand. They had appeared inside a medicinal garden, and there were various types of godly medicine being planted in the many spiritual fields. The spiritual qi here was like an ocean. If anyone with a lower cultivation level had come in, he would probably explode from just inhaling a single breath here. Ling Han let the Empress out. At present, they still needed to accumulate origin power. Though the importance of this had lessened, their origin power still could not be too weak, as it would not be able to support the high power of regulations. Yo, beauty! The large black dog waved a paw, but did not dare to be too insolent. No one could possibly relax completely in front of the Empress. The Empress's demeanor was too strong, too noble, and too poised. The Empress ignored him directly, so the large black dog could only sheepishly scratch his behind. Though this is a medicinal garden, the highest grade of godly medicine here is only level 20 godly medicine. Ling Han swept an eye over the surroundings. With the present pickiness of his, he was already not satisfied with mere saintly medicine. Instead, he wanted celestial medicine. You need to have patience, the large black dog exclaimed. Do you think that celestial medicines are just cabbages to be found anywhere? Even a celestial king tier level force could not possibly grow them all over the mountains and wilds. It is already very impressive if there is over a dozen celestial medicines. Then what about here? Ling Han asked. According to my estimation, there should be 1 or 2 at least, the large black dog deduced. There was no difference in level of celestial medicine. Their only difference was that they contained different regulations. The most important differentiating factor was their age. The older their age, the more regulations they could contain, and the more valuable they would naturally be. As they walked, Ling Han did not turn his back, either. If he encountered matured medicinal ingredients, he would still take them into the Black Tower. Saintly medicines still had some use for him. At least they could help increase his accumulation of origin power. Though the increase would not be great, it was better than nothing. This was not the only medicinal garden here. When they had swept through this one, they exited by climbing over the wall, heading towards the next medicinal garden. But when they had just climbed over the wall, they saw a middle-aged man was presently using a technique to expedite the growth of the medicinal ingredients. All of a sudden, they were staring at each other, and there was an indescribable strangeness about the scene. Chapter 1760, 7 Lives Divine Clouds. Chapter 1760, 7 Lives Divine Clouds. Ling Han's eyes were sharp and his hands moved quickly. Pa! He had knocked that person unconscious with a single palm strike. He looked towards the large black dog and said, Damn dog, I have indeed fallen for your trap again. This is no ancient site. It clearly is the medicinal garden belonging to a major sect. That person who had been knocked unconscious was clearly a herb farmer. Just now, Ling Han had clearly seen that he was using some kind of technique to extract the regulations of heaven and earth to embed into the medicinal ingredients. The large black dog's eyes spun quickly. He soon threw everything to the winds and admitted, You are smart, brat. You have discovered it so quickly. Grandpa Dog is impressed. Ling Han was speechless. This damn dog was completely keeping silent about the major crime while admitting a smaller offense. We are already here. Furthermore, you have already gotten quite a considerable amount of spoils in your pockets, so it would be too late even if you wanted to stop now. Going by the large black dog's tone, he was already dragged into the matter, so there was no need to pretend innocence. Come on. let's go find the celestial medicine. Ling Han sighed. He thought that he was really weak-willed, as his heart actually felt restless because of such a suggestion. Come on, he said. Just like the large black dog had said, he was already in too deep. Then, he'd just play the role of robber this time round. The Empress, meanwhile, was completely unconcerned. In her philosophy, everything in the world was hers and Ling Han was her man, so what couldn't he take for his own? They continued onwards and continued harvesting medicinal ingredients on their way. They encountered a few more herb farmers along the way, and Ling Han knocked them all out before drawing them into the Black Tower. When they left later, he would release them. 2 days later, they were just walking on the path when Xiao, a white figure, streaked past their eyes at an incredibly fast speed. Ling Han's eyes followed that passing streak and saw that it was a small deer. It was no taller than 3 inches and was really pitifully tiny. And this deer was actually the color of flesh, being practically invisible. He could clearly see through into its body, but there were no organs. Instead, there was a seed. 7 lives, divine clouds. Ling Han suddenly called out. This tiny deer was not a real deer, but was rather a godly medicine called 7 lives, divine clouds. From birth, it had to undergo 7 transformations, and it would assume a different appearance every time. For example, it now had the appearance of a deer. In different appearances, the regulations it contained would be completely different. It could be considered an extraordinarily amazing celestial medicine. The 7 lives divine clouds would be considered mature once it entered the first form, and could completely be harvested and consumed. However, in different forms, the regulations that one could obtain would also be completely different. He did not know the exact details. This was related to the environment that this celestial medicine was growing in, because this celestial medicine had legs and could run anywhere it liked. The tiny deer also turned around to look at Ling Han. Then it suddenly opened its mouth and said, "Damn brat, why are you looking at your grandpa deer like that? Be careful, or grandpa deer will rat pee you." This. Ling Han felt like he was about to cry. Why were all the creatures and events he encountered so abnormal? Some unknown change would take place in any ancient sites for no reason, and now he had encountered a celestial medicine that would actually spout crude words at him. Celestial medicine obediently come to Grandpa Dog's mouth. The large black dog's eyes lit up, and he pounced towards the 7 lives divine clouds. "Damn dog, you have not rinsed your mouth for a few million years, and your grandpa deer is about to die from the stink of your breath." The tiny deer's expression was filled with disgust. Its legs broke out into a run, and it immediately ran away rapidly. Ling Han, the Empress, and the large black dog all hurriedly set off in pursuit. Xiao, xiao, xiao. They were all moving at very fast speed as well. Ling Han and the Empress had both cultivated lightning. Flash, the speed of this technique was naturally high. Needless to say, the large black dog was even faster as it was specialized in instant teleportation. In the past, when it had still been in the Genesis tier, it had moved so fast that even a 4th Severance Grand Elder could not manage to catch up to it. But even so, they were not able to catch up to the tiny deer. This celestial medicine was very amazing. Wherever it galloped past, a great number of vines would sprout from the ground and try to entwine Ling Han and his group, causing them a certain amount of trouble for them. Just a moment of delay was enough for this celestial medicine to maintain a specific distance between itself and Ling Han and his group with its speed. "Bunch of trash, and you still want to eat your grandpa deer? You had best eat your grandpa deer's dust instead." That tiny deer turned around its head to mock them as it ran, its expression incredibly arrogant. The Empress was furious, and she launched an attack with a wave of her slender hand. Flashes of sword chi instantly danced out, slicing the heavens and striking the earth. That celestial medicine was so scared that it sprayed out a few drops of fluid, and its white face had already turned green in terror. When others encountered a celestial medicine like it, they all tried their best to catch it, but did not dare do anything else. That was because it was a celestial medicine. No matter what kind of injury it suffered, that was an incredibly colossal loss. With this kind of psyche added with its various tricks, it was able to mix around very easily here, even though it had long since matured. Only when it encountered a few super elites did it have to let out some blood, but they could not bear to devour it completely. But this woman was too lacking in tender feelings and looked like she was about to beat it to death, scaring it so much that it sprayed out a few drops of celestial fluid. Gods really scared me to death. Ling Han's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. With a scoop, he had drawn those several drops of celestial fluid into a jade bottle. His expression was a little strange. This was indeed the treasure fluid from the body of a celestial medicine, but the problem was it had been sprayed out from the tiny deers behind just now. Thinking of this scene, it would definitely become a psychological nightmare for him when he consumed it. He was puzzled. Why did he keep encountering all these strange creatures and events? Surrender! I surrender! The tiny deer wailed. Don't chase Grandpa Deer anymore. If you guys want celestial medicine, Grandpa Deer will give you a little, all right? Please don't kill Grandpa Deer. It was very scared of death. Ling Han suddenly came upon an idea and said, "We won't harm you. Why don't you follow us? I have a medicinal garden, and I guarantee you will love it. You don't look like a good person at all. Wanting to fool your Grandpa Deer. You are still a few thousand years too young." The tiny deer's expression was filled with disgust. The Empress's expression turned cold, and she raised her slender hand. "Love it, of course I will love it." The tiny deer's expression was immediately filled with determination, looking as if it would become angry if anyone dared to make it feel dislike. Ling Han couldn't help but look towards the large black dog and asked, "Is this a relative of yours?" The large black dog scratched his behind. "Looks like it." "Looks like your sister. Your Grandpa Deer does not have any relatives as ugly as you. Just look. Your teeth are showing already. How hideous." The tiny deer's skill at drawing aggression was also top-notch, and it began to provoke the large black dog. "Why, Grandpa Dog is going to devour this guy." The large black dog bared his teeth. "Don't stop your Grandpa Dog." If it were not for Ling Han pulling him back by his tail, the dog would definitely have charged over by now. "Stop playing around." Ling Han drew the 7 lives divine clouds into the black tower. "Ah, ancestor." The moment the tiny deer set eyes on the reincarnation tree, it suddenly paled in shock and galloped over to the roots of the tree. It raised its head and rubbed against it. After a while, it couldn't help but feel puzzled. That's not right. This mother tree has clearly already matured. But why has it not gained intelligence yet? It seems like it has only lived a few centuries. It had really not guessed wrongly. The reincarnation tree had had its growth expedited to maturity by a secret technique of small tower. From a seed until this present condition, its true age was actually even less than Ling Han's. Yet Ling Han was shocked and couldn't help but ask Small Tower, "The reincarnation tree is also a life force of the heaven and earth." Chapter 1761, Celestial Bath Pool. Chapter 1761, Celestial Bath Pool. "That's right." Small Tower nodded frankly. However, the growth of this mother tree was also expedited, and it is far from becoming a source power. Thus, it is presently impossible for you to extract the source power. Then how much longer would it take? Ling Han asked. "At least a few eras," Small Tower replied calmly. Ling Han shook his head. There was no way to expect it then. A few 100 million years was too long. Perhaps it would be faster for him to find another reincarnation tree. In the celestial realm, there was definitely no small number of celestial kings that had lived longer than an epoch. No matter what, the 7 lives divine clouds was considerably satisfied with the conditions inside the Black Tower. There was no small number of medicinal ingredients here, enough for it to rule over. There was a group of lackeys for it to boss around, and there was a mother tree which was the source of all the celestial medicines in this world too. The 7 lives divine clouds made an agreement with Ling Han. Every 1,000 years, it would provide some celestial fluid for Ling Han, but Ling Han also warned it that it definitely could not be sprayed out from a specific part of its body. This celestial medicine said that there was another celestial medicine which was on extremely bad terms with it in this place. The two of them would always end up fighting when they met each other. The other celestial medicine was called Ultimate Celestial Elimination, and what it contained was completely the regulations of poison. Anywhere it passed, all living creatures would perish. Thus, the medicinal ingredients here feared this ultimate celestial elimination very much, and begged the 7 lives divine clouds to stop the ultimate celestial elimination from going around anywhere it liked. Part of the reason why the 2 celestial medicines would fight was because of this, and the other part was that both wanted to become the boss of this place. And now, the 7 lives divine clouds was trying its best to spur Ling Han on into killing the ultimate celestial elimination. Ling Han naturally ignored it. He did not have the slightest interest in the regulations of poison. Furthermore, while the 7 lives divine clouds, which was similarly a celestial medicine, and might have no fear of its poisonous traits, he himself was not immune. If he were to go and retrieve the ultimate celestial elimination, the possibility of him dying was much higher. Even the large black dog shook his head. If anyone wanted to retrieve a celestial medicine like the ultimate celestial elimination, he would at least have to be an immortal palace tier elite to be able to accomplish the feat. Now that we've got the celestial medicine, let's go, Ling Han said. Brat, your palate is really too easily satisfied. How could you be satisfied with a single celestial medicine? The large black dog scoffed. There are lots of good stuff here. Ahead of us is the treasury, and don't tell me you don't want a pseudo-celestial tool? Ling Han's need for a pseudo-celestial tool was really not all that high, but he was very interested in top-grade, godly metal and pseudo-divine metal. He thought that since they were already thieves, then they might as well get some more treasures. He could think of repayment after he became a celestial king, he said to himself. The large black dog looked like he was taking a walk in a park, and went in twists and turns while leading Ling Han and the Empress. Very soon, they had walked out of the mountains, and a group of palaces appeared ahead of them, stretching out for who knew how many miles. Those are all treasure troves. The large black dog looked down from above, his eyes shining. There is a protective formation, Ling Han said after a glance. In front of me, there is no such thing as formations, the large black dog declared proudly. They arrived in front of the first palace, and the large black dog immediately began unraveling the formation. Ling Han also lent him a hand. The man and dog cooperated together, and they very soon created an opening in the protective formation of the palace. You are the type suitable to become a thief, Brat, the large black dog praised. What can you expect from a hog but a grunt? Why does a compliment from your mouth sound so awkward? Ling Han fanned his hands. They entered the palace. This was a store of ingredients, and primarily contained fabrics. They were not ordinary materials, but consisted of the silk spun by immortal beasts as well as woven from the fur of immortal beasts. And this could not be considered celestial material yet, and could only be considered pseudo-celestial material. Only celestial king level was worthy of being called celestial material, but pseudo-celestial material was already very extraordinary. Ling Han naturally would not be reserved and gathered everything. The large black dog and Ling Han began fighting over the spoils. Not only had they stuffed their spatial god tools to their fullest, they even wrapped themselves in it. They were really pretentious. After they had swept through this palace completely, they went to the second palace. After breaking through the formation and entering, they saw that there were actually multiple pools here. Huh! Ling Han and his group all exclaimed in surprise. These pools were really too extraordinary, exuding the light of great Tao. Regulations had taken solid form, swimming in the water like fishes. "Celestial bath pools!" The large black dog called out loudly, and immediately jumped into one of the pools with a splash. He opened his mouth and simply floated around in the pool of water like that, absorbing the precious essence in the fluids of the pool. Ling Han and the Empress also jumped in respectively. Unfortunately, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden would not be able to enjoy such benefits. It was invigorating. Great Tao entered into Ling Han's body, using the waters of the pool as a bridge. It seemed as if the heaven and earth were clearing his doubts and offering teachings inside his body. It was possible for even an idiot's cultivation level to soar greatly. Ling Han couldn't help but be stunned. Just what kind of heaven-defying technique was this? He was even more curious by now. Which major sect did this treasury belong to? They were definitely exorbitantly wealthy. It was unknown how many treasures were contained in the waters of the pool. There was saintly medicine of the highest grade, and even a small amount of celestial medicine, as well as the essence of immortal beasts. Ling Han could see a tip of the iceberg through absorbing the pool's fluids. Those were the horns of a few immortal beasts that had been ground into dust, and their murderous aura had been erased by an elite. Finally, they turned into a medicinal bath with boundless benefits. He was rich, he was rich. Ling Han and his group did not make any sound, and tried their best to absorb the treasure fluid as much as possible. There were only a total of 10 such pools. 7 days later, Ling Han was the first to absorb all the essence in a pool. He climbed out and entered into the 4th pool. 2 days later, the Empress and the large black dog came out at practically the same time and entered into the 5th and 6th pool, respectively. It was clear from this that it was Ling Han's physique that was still the strongest. The Empress's divine fetus allowed her to split out 9 doppelgangers to simultaneously share and absorb the medicinal effects together. But the large black dog was actually incredibly freakish as well. This was a little shocking. Could it be that it was a divine fetus as well? When Ling Han thought that this damn dog could possibly be a divine fetus as well, he felt the words divine fetus had become very murky from now onwards. The gap between them soon became wider. When Ling Han entered into the 7th pool, a whole 3 days had passed before the Empress and the large black dog finally entered into the 8th and 9th pool, respectively. When Ling Han entered into the 10th pool, the Empress and the large black dog entered respectively only after he had absorbed about half of the medicinal effects in it. The 3 people worked at the same time and very soon absorbed the 10th pool completely as well. A heat energy soared in Ling Han's body, immediately drying his clothes. He burped and could see the divine light of great Tao had turned into divine, red clouds that spluttered out. That was because the regulations in his body were too deep and resounding, and he did not manage to digest them completely, so they had soared out of his body. It couldn't be helped. Who asked them to be thieves? They naturally were more concerned about consuming first before slowly digesting what they had eaten. These pools could not be moved. Otherwise, Ling Han would definitely have carried them off and slowly absorbed them. The condition now was actually very wasteful. Gee. It was at this moment that the great doors of the palace opened and a person walked in. He was a young man who looked very handsome. His expression was filled with anticipation, and he appeared to be incredibly excited. However, he immediately discovered the presence of 2 other people and a dog in the palace, and his expression suddenly became very dramatic. This could be imagined because it was really too unexpected. Ling Han was also surprised. He realized that this world was really too small. That person was Han Chi. Could it be that this was the treasury of the Han clan? Chapter 1762. Advancing to Second Severance. Chapter 1762. Advancing to Second Severance. Han Chi gaped, completely incapable of believing his own eyes. This place was the treasury of the Han clan, and also the most heavily guarded location. putting aside the fact that outsiders wouldn't be able to come in here at all. Even for the Han clan itself, there were not many members that were allowed to come here either. He was the youngest son of the patriarch of the Han clan, and thus was given special privileges. After advancing into the severing mundane tier, he could experience a celestial bath here. Not only would it stabilize his cultivation level, it could further increase his strength. When he used this opportunity to reach the middle stage, or even the late stage of the first severance, he would go and seek Ling Han out to personally take revenge for their previous grudge. His cultivation level could soar just by taking a bath. Amazing, right? This was the power of a 3-star force. But Han Chi could never have imagined that when he pushed these doors open, he would actually see 3 outsiders here. And what made him feel even more stifled was that one of them was actually Ling Han. How was this possible? These words kept going over and over in his head. How could this be? How could this be? How could this be? After at least a few breaths, he suddenly came back to himself. These 3 guys actually absorbed all the essence in the celestial bath pools. Looking at the color of the pool waters, he knew that it had completely turned into ordinary clear water. His expression immediately became extremely miserable. That was his celestial medicine bath. Yet it had now been absorbed completely by his enemy. This almost caused his heart to shatter. Why you? He pointed at Ling Han, his whole body trembling and face extraordinarily pale. He could not even muster up a single breath. Ling Han gave an "oh" and asked the large black dog, "You already knew that this was the Han clan's place." "That's right. Do you think that your grandpa dog is so idle and free?" the large black dog scoffed. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "This is the first time that I think that you have done a good deed." Grandpa Dog has always done only good deeds. What people call as the epitome of morality is Grandpa Dog, the large black dog declared, completely shameless. This large black dog was really quite interesting. It was aware of the various incidents of the Han clan coercing Ling Han, and thus brought him here to rob the Han clan blind. This deserved a full cup of wine. "Why were you?" Han Chi's breath still had not been mustered up, but his expression was already turned from white to green, and he could possibly faint at any time. Those were 10 celestial bath pools, and who knew how many billion years was needed to prepare all of them? If he was not the direct son of the ancestor of the Han clan, how could he possibly be allowed to come here for a bath the moment he advanced to the first severance? But even so, he could only enter into a single celestial bath pool. Otherwise, he would definitely be heavily punished by the clan, and it was not impossible for him to be even executed. And now, all 10 celestial bath pools had been completely sucked dry. "All of you die!" Han Chi finally exploded. He summoned a flag, and the moment it unfurled, a sudden air of extreme coldness spread out. Ka. Thick layers of ice appeared on the pillars and floor tiles of the palace. Ling Han took a step forward, and the 9 heavens flame surged. Boom! The severe coldness was instantly stopped. He crossed his arms behind his back and stepped towards Han Chi. The 9 heavens flame blazed, splitting the ice in half, allowing him to calmly and leisurely approach Han Chi. Han Chi gritted his teeth and waved the flag with all his might, attempting to stop Ling Han's approach. It was useless. He had only just entered the first severance, so how was he supposed to match Ling Han? Even if the flag in his grasp was a pseudo-celestial tool, it was useless. At most, it could only display the might of the peak stage of the first severance in his hands, and in front of Ling Han, this was less than nothing. Seeing Ling Han had already come very close, Han Chi could only grit his teeth, turn around, and run. This was the territory of the Han clan, and who knew how many elites were standing guard here? How could Ling Han be allowed to do as he liked here? But his body had just turned around when Ling Han clutched his neck with a single move. Han Chi couldn't help but be greatly shocked. Could it be that he would have to destroy his physical body again? Yet Ling Han did not make a move. He knew that there was definitely a protective technique that an elite had placed in Han Chi's body, and couldn't bother himself to spare the effort, either. He directly sealed off Han Chi's cultivation level, and then tossed him over to the large black dog. Is there any way to make him suffer as much as possible under the condition that his life is not harmed? The large black dog's eyes turned, and he immediately showed a hint of excitement. "Leave it to me." But then his expression immediately changed. "Oh no, this brat has touched the restrictions, and there are presently elites of the Han clan rushing over. Let's retreat quickly." Ling Han nodded, though they had only robbed 2 treasure palaces here, and there were a considerable number of other places they had not emptied out yet. How would they be able to match immortal palace-tier elites? Retreat, retreat, retreat. They went back the same way they had come. After they had exited the final protective formation, the large black dog still spared some effort to repair the formation, restoring it to a flawless condition. In this way, the Han clan would have completely no idea where they had come in from, and thus they could also leave a back door for themselves. In future, they could continue to enter from this spot. Then they traveled back to where the bushes were, yet saw that there would be occasional elites streaking past in the skies, as well as powerful divine scents doing multiple sweeps. Clearly, the entire Han clan had already been alerted completely, and they were intending to find their uninvited guests. The large black dog set up a temporary transfer formation, which only sent them out of the surrounding diameter of 10,000 miles. However, this was already outside the territory of the Han clan. Then they circled back and activated the formation again. With a flash of light, they had already returned to Dark Moon City. After their taking the formation apart, no one would know what they had done or where they had gone. The large black dog carried Han Chi off with it with a snicker, and came back only after half a day had passed. However, Han Chi had disappeared. The large black dog explained, "Grandpa Dog stuffed that brat under a latrine pit. I guarantee that there is no way that the Han clan could find him even if they turned the whole celestial realm upside down." Ling Han's expression involuntarily became strange. Indeed, what celestial level elite would want to look under a latrine pit? Furthermore, celestials were immortal, so with the fact that Han Chi was buried underneath a latrine pit, he could not possibly die for billions of years, yet he would never see the light of day again, either. The large black dog was indeed two-faced to the extreme. The consequences of offending him were very serious. Ling Han and the Empress entered into seclusion. They had absorbed all 10 celestial bath pools, and this was something accumulated by the Han clan over who knew how many billions of years even a 3-star force needed innumerable billions of years to be able to accumulate such resources. So how valuable was it? A month later, they emerged from the Black Tower. Suddenly, tribulation clouds gathered. They were both about to break through to the second severance. The 2 of them greeted the heavenly tribulation head-on, and with how freakish they were, they naturally survived it easily. Second severance. They were both very excited, and did not think that they would have advanced into the second severance so quickly. However, this was only possible by relying on the accumulated resources of a 3-star force. Of course, the other reason was also because they had the reincarnation tree, which allowed them to digest these benefits in the nick of time. Not long after, the large black dog also scrambled over. He had actually advanced to the second severance as well. Ling Han was already able to remain calm in the face of this freak dog's strangeness. Han Hongfei has already left Dark Moon City, and just nice we can return and play around again at the Ding clan, Ling Han said coldly. Previously, he only knew that there was not a single good person in the Ding clan, but he had never imagined that they would actually be so deranged to actually create an evil object like the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. If that kind of evil tool was successfully refined, it meant that millions and millions of lives had been erased. Otherwise, it was definitely impossible that this evil tool could possess such frightening might. Chapter 1763. Insta-kill, a third severance. Chapter 1763. Insta-kill, a third severance. Han Hongfei had left. He had not left willingly, but had rather been forced into leaving by the elites of the Black Moon sect. There was no helping it. This was the territory of the Black Moon sect, and what had you, a young soul elite, come for? To strut around and show off? Even if an immortal palace tier elite from the Han clan had come, which the Black Moon sect could not deal with, didn't they still have the Fu clan behind them? Since the Ding clan did not have elites on the level of dividing soul tier, whom did Ling Han have to fear? He and the Empress went to the Ding clan once again. The demons here. When they saw Ling Han, the guards at the entrance all screamed shrilly in their fear. They did not even bother with their job of guards anymore, and hurriedly turned around and fled, yelling sharply as they went. Ling Han stroked his chin. Was he really that frightening? Evil brat, have you come to accept your death? Ding Shan and Ding Song appeared at the same time. In these few days, Ding Shan had also returned from the Black Moon sect. Evil brat. Ling Han chuckled. You guys have refined such an evil object like the bell of 10,000 ghosts, so who exactly is evil here? We have several tens of thousands of clansmen in our Ding clan, yet more than half of them have been slaughtered at your hand. So if not you, who is the great evil here? Ding Shan stated menacingly. No matter what, he could not have imagined that a brat that had just advanced to the severing mundane tier would actually bring such a terrifying calamity to his clan. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and he retorted. Everyone says advancing to the severing mundane tier is severing one's mortal bonds. But as I see it, what all of you have severed is your conscience. How dare you? Ding Shan roared in fury. He charged out, shooting out a fist, and it seemed as if the heaven and earth itself was about to collapse. Ling Han stood with his arms crossed behind his back, neither moving nor evading, neither parrying nor blocking. You're courting death. Ding Shan was so furious, even his beard was trembling. He was a third severance elite, and Ling Han actually dared not to move or evade. That was really too arrogant. But that would be good too. You dare to confront me head-on, and that is a move to court your own death. At the side, Ding Song also revealed a cold smirk. This brat was really puffed up with conceit. Did he think that he could match even a third severance? Ding Shan arrived, his entire body wrapped in the power of time. Regulations had taken the form of chains. Jiang, 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 the multiple chains suddenly shot out, making it seem as if his whole person had become a porcupine. He stretched his arms wide to wrap them around Ling Han, wanting to use these chains of regulations to pierce directly through Ling Han, giving him an endless agony. If Ling Han was allowed to die easily, that would really be letting off this evil brat too lightly. Yo, so enthusiastic. Ling Han chuckled, but his tone immediately turned cold in the next instant. Unfortunately, I cannot afford to take this kind of deranged, demented embrace from you. Hopefully, you can still be this arrogant later on. Ding Shan had already pounced on him. Ling Han moved, his right hand grabbing directly into the power of time. He, too, channeled the tide of the ages, and the two regulations canceled each other out. Suddenly, a river of time appeared, and some previous memories of their lives could be seen in it, but they were all vague and obscure and could not be grasped at all. Ding Shan's expression immediately became incredibly dramatic because he saw a giant hand that could not be halted reaching out towards his head. It was as if it could not be touched by any technique, and also seemed as if it itself was a manifestation of regulations, and was thus capable of being so absolutely unrestrained. He almost died in shock and hurriedly screeched to a forceful halt, wanting to leap backwards and retreat. You think you can escape? Ling Han smirked coldly. Pa, his palm descended and grabbed Ding Shan's forehead. This position was really too humiliating. A great third severance Grand Elder, a being with a limitless lifespan, actually had his head held by another. If this spread out, how would Ding Shan have the face to see others in future? He quickly began to struggle, waving both his arms, kicking his legs madly and shooting out multiple attacks of power of regulation, wanting to force Ling Han to release him. Ling Han gave a cold humph, and with a shake of his right hand, "Pa, pa, pa," the sounds of bones breaking rang out repeatedly. Ding Shan was like a snake that had been gripped by its weak point. Instantly, all the bones in his body had been shattered. Then his limbs drooped weakly, no longer having any ability to fight back. At the sidelines, Ding Song felt a chill seeping from beneath the soles of his feet and directly spreading throughout his whole body. A third severance, Grand Elder, did not even have the slightest ability to resist in front of Ling Han. This was something that only a fourth severance, Grand Elder, could accomplish. My gods! Second severance. Ding Song finally managed to see through Ling Han's cultivation level, or rather, he had finally noticed. Even his lips were trembling. This was unimaginable. He had clearly just advanced into the first severance, and only a few days had passed since then, and he was already in the second severance. Monster, an absolute monster. How did their Ding clan become enemies with this kind of monster? At this moment, Ding Song finally felt regret. Why had they coveted the Hu clan's celestial technique, which eventually led to the Hu clan being completely wiped out all those years ago? What he regretted, even further, was why hadn't they made sure that the Hu clan was completely eliminated? And the consequence was that so many years after the event, a monster the likes of Ling Han had emerged in vengeance. Let him go! Though he was covered completely in cold sweat, he still forced himself to look calm. Ling Han shook his head and asked with a grin, "Are you an idiot?" Ding Song also knew that Ling Han would not let him go, but what other words did he have to say? "Let him go, and all your grudges with the Ding clan will be cleared from now onwards," he forced out through gritted teeth. When he said these words, his heart felt suffocated and filled with fury, but what else could he do? Even a Yang Soul elite could only watch helplessly as Ling Han escaped, and this brat's rate of advancement was so exaggerating. If they didn't clear their debts, the Ding clan would really be finished. As long as it did not involve another 3-star force or 2-star force, the Fu clan and the Black Moon sect would not care about the survival of Dark Moon City's factions, because no matter how much they fought amongst themselves, Dark Moon City would still be under the rule of the Fu clan and the Black Moon sect. Thus, the Ding clan could not possibly ask for protection from the Black Moon sect and the Fu clan. A third severance Grand Elder had been produced through the expenditure of who knew how many resources, and a considerable number of first severance Grand Elders of the Ding clan had already died. They really couldn't afford further loss. Cleared. Ling Han broke into surprised laughter in spite of himself. These people of the Ding clan were really living in their own world. Could it be that they thought that they were the true victims in this matter? The Hu clan had been wiped out, and it was to be considered cleared just like that? He had been targeted repeatedly by the Ding clan, and it was to be cleared like that? The Ding clan had refined such an evil object like the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, and they wanted this to be cleared. Cleared your sister. Ling Han laughed loudly, both hands gripping Ding Shan's head. Then with a twist, "Ka!" the sound of bones cracking as crisp as frying beans resounded. Then he threw Ding Shan over to Ding Song. Ding Shan's body, skidded 9 to 12 meters on the ground, just managing to stop in front of the Ding Song's toes. He died. There was no need for Ding Song to examine closely, and he already knew that Ding Shan was already a fully dead man whose spirit had even been eliminated. His whole body was trembling, partly because of fury, but more so because of terror. When had it been that a minor character that was only an ant in his eyes actually possessed the strength to easily kill him? His life or death was no longer within his control, and this emotion was too terrifying. Grand Elder Ding Song. A few more people had arrived, and they were all First Severance Grand Elders and Second Severance Grand Elders of the Ding clan. Because there was no longer any need to seek Ling Han, they had naturally all returned. They had only been one step late, yet discovered much to their shock that Ding Shan had died. A third Severance Grand Elder actually died in such a calm way. There was no battle that shook the mountains and caused an earthquake. It was as if only a nameless foot soldier like cat or dog had died. "Grand Elder!" they all exclaimed in shock, feeling as if the heavens themselves were falling down on them. "Where is Ding Yaolong? If he still doesn't come out, your Ding clan is going to die without any descendants left behind." With a thought from Ling Han, the 3 battle beasts leaped out of his body, beginning a grand massacre. All of a sudden, the Ding clan manor was drowned out in terrible screams. Chapter 1764. Everything has its vanquisher. Chapter 1764. Everything has its vanquisher. The 10-beast technique was a celestial king tier secret technique, and the 3 battle beasts were more so imbued with source powers, such as the 9 heavens flame and the Shenin source water. Although the battle beast, which was imbued with the power of lightning, was slightly weaker, it could still rival ordinary Third Severance Grand Elders. Who could block these 3 devastating battle beasts? The Ding clan was instantly transformed into a sea of destruction and blood. Cries of misery and agony echoed throughout the entire city. The Grand Elders of the Long clan and the Duan clan immediately arrived in the surroundings. In fact, even Mao Dai had come. However, these 3 elites only observed the battle in the distance, and they didn't show any signs of interfering. Moreover, they were all wearing expressions of shock and disbelief. Ling Han's battle prowess was incredible. The Grand Elders of the Long clan and the Duan clan were still confident that they could suppress Ling Han. However, after pondering over this question for a while, Mao Dai resolutely shook his head. If he were to battle against Ling Han, he would have no confidence that he could achieve a certain victory. Anyhow, the current situation was quite strange. Mao Dai, as well as the Grand Elders of the Long clan and the Duan clan, had all been attracted here by the commotion. However, where was Ding Yaolong? He was still hiding in some unknown corner. Was he afraid of Ling Han? This naturally couldn't be the case. He was at the peak stage of the 4th Severance, and he was also a supremely talented elite. Thus, he definitely possessed the ability to suppress Ling Han at this moment. Something felt off, so there was definitely more to the current situation than met the eye. Ling Han was also keeping alert against any sudden changes. In any case, the current massacre didn't need much of his attention anyway. The 3 battle beasts were seemingly invincible as they continued to wantonly wreak havoc. Evil brat! When only less than 1/10 of the Ding clan remained, a loud and furious roar suddenly boomed through the sky. Ding Yaolong had finally appeared. "Ancestor!" the remaining members of the Ding clan exclaimed in excitement. Ding Yaolong was the backbone of the Ding clan, and he was also the symbol of might and invincibility. Even if the entire Ding clan were massacred, it would still be eventually rebuilt as long as Ding Yaolong remained. Meanwhile, Ling Han was slightly astonished as he turned around to look at Ding Yaolong. This was because Ding Yaolong's hair was completely white, and his face was also full of wrinkles. He looked so old that Ling Han could barely recognize him. One had to realize that Ding Yaolong was a prodigy among prodigies. He had severed the mundane at an extremely young age, and he had only looked to be around 30 years old at that time. He had been tall and sturdy, and he had also been brimming with vitality and vigor. Now, however, he looked like a frail old man. He had transformed far too much. "Die!" Ding Yaolong roared as he charged at Ling Han. He then immediately launched an attack without saying anything else. Whoa! He summoned his bell of 10,000 ghosts. Boom! A boundless, ice-cold aura swept forth, and this was accompanied by the shrill wails of 10,000 ghosts. This attack was enough to make one go numb with apprehension, and it was enough to make one's divine sense leave their body. The bell of 10,000 ghosts had actually become even stronger. Ling Han finally understood why Ding Yaolong hadn't appeared earlier. He also understood why Ding Yaolong had transformed into this ghost-like state. As it turned out, he had been strengthening his bell of 10,000 ghosts. Regarding the specifics of how he had achieved this, Ling Han didn't know. He wasn't interested in finding out either. Presumably, it required a sacrifice of one's life force and energy, and it was because of this that Ding Yaolong had ended up in such a miserable state. There was one thing that Ling Han could confirm, though. The current bell of 10,000 ghosts was incredibly terrifying. The shrill wails of 10,000 ghosts surged toward Ling Han. Initially, the cultivation level of these vengeful ghosts had only been around the early stage of the third severance. Now, however, their cultivation level had already reached the peak stage of the third severance. If only one or two of the ghosts had achieved this rise in cultivation level, it naturally wouldn't have been any problem at all. However, as its name suggested, the bell of 10,000 ghosts held a profound number of vengeful ghosts. 10,000 ghosts had achieved this sudden rise in cultivation level. This was a genuinely terrifying notion. Ling Han was being surrounded and attacked by a profound number of vengeful ghosts at the peak stage of the third severance, and each of these vengeful ghosts was completely fearless and even undying. Just how terrifying was this? At the very least, Mao Dai and the Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan were feeling so apprehensive that their hair had already stood on ends. They immediately shot back in retreat, moving dozens of kilometers into the distance. This was to avoid being swept up in the suffusing black mists. Large numbers of vengeful ghosts were appearing from that expanse of black mist, and they would definitely struggle to protect themselves if they were caught anywhere near it. However, Ling Han simply smiled upon seeing this attack. In the cultivation world, quantitative changes would often lead to qualitative changes. This was the case with the bell of 10,000 ghosts, which could release 10,000 vengeful ghosts to attack its target. Even fourth severance Grand Elders would struggle to withstand this attack. However, Ling Han had also experienced a qualitative change of his own. This qualitative change had resulted from him advancing from the first severance to the second severance. His godly bones had become tougher, and they had genuinely risen to the level of 2-star divine metal. What did this signify? This signified that even fourth severance Grand Elders would need to attack him several times if they wanted to wound him. That being the case, how could Ling Han be afraid of third severance, vengeful ghosts? Would it make a difference, even if they were at the peak stage of the third severance? Everything had its vanquisher. Right now, the bell of 10,000 ghosts was nothing but trash in Ling Han's eyes. Ling Han wrapped one of his arms around the Empress' waist, and he wrapped his other arm around the heavenly phoenix, divine maiden's waist. He then confidently strode forward. After all, how could the vengeful ghosts near him? If they weren't incinerated by the 9 heavens flame, then they would be transformed into ice statues by the Xianin source water. Pooh! Mao Dai and the Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan all gasped in shock upon seeing Ling Han casually stride forward. Their mouths hung so wide open that even an egg could be stuffed inside. This was unbelievable. This was far too fucking unbelievable. Even fourth severance Grand Elders could only kneel down and submit to Ling Han's incredible battle prowess. Impossible! Ding Yaolong exclaimed in shock. His eyes were wide with puzzlement and disbelief. He had exhausted his life force, and even transformed himself into this miserable state in order to increase the power of the bell of 10,000 ghosts. Yet it was still completely ineffective against Ling Han. This was far too crushing. This was simply unfathomable. Trying to astonish a fourth severance Grand Elder was an incredibly difficult task. However, Ling Han had done so with ease. Moreover, he had astonished not one fourth severance Grand Elder, but 3. Of course, he had also astonished that third severance Grand Elder. Nothing is impossible. Effort is the decisive factor, Ling Han said. He waved his hand, unleashing an orb of flashing lightning that exploded in the air. Pum! There was a deafening boom, and most of the black mist was instantly dissipated into nothingness. Along with it, hundreds of vengeful ghosts were also blasted into smithereens. Cracking light spear. This was a large area of effect attack, and its effects were astonishingly good for the current situation. This was because the vengeful ghosts were only at the peak stage of the third severance, and Ling Han just happened to be powerful enough to kill such beings. Each explosion could kill a large swathe of vengeful ghosts, and it was as if Ling Han were mowing through weeds. Ding Yaolong couldn't help but shudder. These vengeful ghosts were summoned by the bell of 10,000 ghosts, so they weren't genuine, corporeal beings. Thus, there would be no concept of life and death. In turn, it wouldn't matter if they were obliterated and destroyed. After all, the bell of 10,000 ghosts could simply summon more. However, the bell of 10,000 ghosts would consume a portion of power each time it summoned a vengeful ghost. If too much power was consumed, it would eventually fall into a slumber. At that time, Ding Yaolong would need to sacrifice his blood and life force to awaken it again. How can this be? How can this be? Ling Han continued to unleash cracking light spears toward the swarm of vengeful ghosts. Even though the bell of 10,000 ghosts could continue to summon vengeful ghosts, the rate at which it did so was nowhere near the rate at which Ling Han was destroying them. Thus, the number of vengeful ghosts instantly started to decrease at a rapid rate. In the beginning, there had been 10,000 vengeful ghosts. Now, however, there was only a small number of sparsely located vengeful ghosts. At this moment, they posed absolutely no threat to Ling Han. The Grand Elders of the Long Clan and the Duan Clan exchanged a glance before immediately attacking in unison. They were going to seize this opportunity to eliminate their rival. Killing Ding Yaolong was not only to eliminate the problem of the bell of 10,000 ghosts. With his death, the resources of the Ding clan would also become the resources of the Long Clan and the Duan Clan. This was a huge and mouth-watering amount of wealth. This was their best opportunity, so how could they not seize it with both hands? The two elites immediately teamed up, launching a wave of furious attacks at Ding Yaolong. The Ding clan was facing an existential crisis. Chapter 1765, Annihilating the Ding Clan. Chapter 1765, Annihilating the Ding Clan. With his hands freed, Ling Han started to chase after and attack Ding Song and the other severing mundane tier Grand Elders. Who could escape from his lightning? Meanwhile, the Empress also summoned her 9 clones, each of which was a king tier among king tiers at the second severance. Moreover, since Ding Song had already been targeted by Ling Han, who else could rival her and her clones? Mao Dai hesitated for a moment before also resolutely joining the battle. With so many elites ganging up to attack them, the Ding clan was now facing an overwhelming existential crisis. This was their karma. In the past, the Ding clan had tricked the Hu clan and borrowed the power of celestial king forces to annihilate the Hu clan. To say nothing of the Black Moon sect. Even the Fu clan hadn't dared to say anything about this. Now, however, they were facing the heavy consequences. Grand Elder. Ancestor. Damn it. The members of the Ding clan were all screaming in shock and fury. Almost none of them surrendered, and many of them chose to resist until the very end. However, how could they rival the power of third severance and fourth severance Grand Elders? Apart from Ding Yaolong, the rest of the Ding clan was completely and thoroughly massacred. However, if they didn't kill Ding Yaolong, he would eventually flee with his bell of 10,000 ghosts and create another Ding clan elsewhere. Thus, Ding Yaolong had to die, and the bell of 10,000 ghosts had to be destroyed. The Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan started to unleash increasingly powerful and furious attacks. Things had already come to this, so there was already no path of retreat. They had to carry through to the end and resolutely kill Ding Yaolong. "Old geezers, you're seeking death!" Ding Yaolong roared. There was a murderous gleam in his eyes, and he continued, "After I flee, I'll definitely take the bell of 10,000 ghosts for a stroll around your clans. I'll let you experience the feeling of losing your entire clan. In your dreams!" Ling Han roared as he charged over. He activated his immovable deity metal body, and he unleashed powerful celestial techniques from each of his 6 hands. His battle prowess rose by a whopping 10-fold. At this moment, his battle prowess could roughly rival that of elites at the early stage of the 4th Severance. Although he was still too weak to rival those at the peak stage of the 4th Severance, his powerful physique meant that he wouldn't be easily defeated by them, either. With Ling Han's help, the pressure on the Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan instantly decreased by a significant amount. Why was Ling Han participating in this battle? If Ding Yaolong unleashed a sacrificial technique to kill both himself and his opponents, Ling Han would resolutely step forward to block his attack. Moreover, he would be completely unscathed at that time. What was the most frightening thing when battling against those at the same cultivation level? Was it not sacrificial techniques that could kill both the host and their opponents? To say nothing of battling 2 against 1, even if it were a battle of 10 against 1, the single person might still be able to kill one of their opponents if they unleashed a sacrificial technique. After all, which of those at the severing mundane tier wasn't a prodigy among prodigies? However, with Ling Han's participation, Ding Yaolong was stripped of the right to even unleash such a sacrificial technique. That being the case, the elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan instantly felt much more at ease. At the same time, they could also unleash their powerful attacks with more confidence. On the contrary, Ding Yaolong was feeling extremely frustrated and stifled. He had already been facing immense pressure when fighting against the 2 Grand Elders who were at the same cultivation level as him. Although Ling Han was slightly weaker than them, with only a battle prowess at the early stage of the 4th Severance, Ding Yaolong still wasn't able to completely ignore his attacks. How is this brat's defensive ability so powerful? Ding Yaolong was on the verge of tears. He had even been stripped of the right to unleash a sacrificial attack. How vexing would it be if he were to die here today? "Aya!" he roared in fury and indignance. He was the only remaining member of the Ding clan, and he had already been pushed into a corner of despair. In fact, he couldn't even sacrifice his life to kill his opponents. This caused him to almost explode with rage and frustration. "Commit fewer evils in your next life," Ling Han said coldly. He unleashed his Tide of the Ages, completely shattering Ding Yaolong's secret technique of time. This was an extremely powerful secret technique that pertained to the power of time. In fact, with the protection of this secret technique, Ding Yaolong could even gain the ability to fight against 2 Grand Elders at the same cultivation level as him. However, you've already committed far too many evils in this lifetime, so you won't have an opportunity to be reborn as a human in your next life. Brat, I'll kill you even if it means death. Ding Yaolong howled. His eyes were bloodshot as he furiously lunged at Ling Han. Ling Han snickered upon hearing this. Even if he didn't channel his indestructible heaven scroll, Ding Yaolong would still need to use the power of regulations to slowly refine him to death. Ding Yaolong definitely wouldn't be able to kill him using brute strength. That being the case, how could Ding Yaolong kill him? In any case, he still had the indestructible true fluid. Thus, even if he were truly killed, he could still rise from the ashes and revive. Ding Yaolong would definitely be terrified to death if he learned of this. "Old bastard, go die!" Ling Han shouted as he exchanged blows with Ding Yaolong. Although he was sent flying time and time again, he would always use lightning flash to immediately charge over again. Ding Yaolong was completely obstructed by him. The Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan seized this opportunity to furiously attack Ding Yaolong. If they couldn't kill him while holding such an overwhelming advantage, they would be absolute embarrassments of Fourth Severance Grand Elders. If that were the case, they might as well find a slab of tofu to slap themselves to death. Ding Yaolong was riddled with wounds that were becoming more and more severe. However, he was being surrounded and attacked by 3 great elites, so he couldn't even find an opportunity to escape and flee. He could only fight to the death. Yet, fighting to the death would be completely meaningless. After all, Ling Han was an absolute freak who could even block his sacrificial attacks. Upon thinking of this, Ding Yaolong felt so frustrated that he almost spat a mouthful of blood. Pung! 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 Dozens of attacks from the Grand Elders of the Long clan and the Duan clan slammed into Ding Yaolong's back, causing him to vomit blood and stumble back in retreat. However, this also caused him to become increasingly wild and furious as he charged after Ling Han. He refused to believe that Ling Han's defenses were invincible. However, he was destined to be disappointed. He was being relentlessly attacked, and this caused his battle prowess to be greatly affected. After all, he had already expended a huge amount of his life force and energy to increase the power of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. Thus, how could he unleash any more power? In fact, Ding Yaolong would violently spit a mouthful of blood with each attack that he launched. He naturally couldn't withstand this kind of expenditure, regardless of how much blood he had. Thus, after reaching a certain limit, his aura instantly started to fall significantly. The Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan were ecstatic upon seeing this. From today onward, there would be no more Ding clan. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Ding Yaolong threw his head back and roared in fury. His chest was already shattered, and blood was violently spurting from his heart. His vitality was also rapidly draining away. However, there was still anger and indignance in his wide-open eyes. A grand elite at the peak stage of the Fourth Severance was killed just like that. Ling Han threw another punch, unleashing his 9 heavens flame to incinerate the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. Shrill wails echoed through the air, and numerous projections of vengeful ghosts rose from the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. This was the final struggle of the evil weapon. However, without the power of its master, and due to its huge expenditure from before, the struggle of the 10,000 ghosts seemed extremely frail and listless. It wasn't long before the numerous formation patterns on its surface were refined and erased. These formation patterns were the reason that it had become an evil weapon. Ling Han then retrieved his divine demon sword to slash at the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, absorbing the godly metal essence that was contained within this evil weapon. If he hadn't erased the formation patterns first, the divine demon sword wouldn't have been able to absorb the godly metal essence from the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. This was because the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts would have instinctively counterattacked. Moreover, the divine demon sword was currently unable to defeat this evil weapon. The Grand Elders from the Long clan and the Duan clan silently observed this scene. Only when the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts was comprehensively destroyed did they calmly nod, finally at ease. This evil weapon was far too threatening to them. Ling Han also nodded at the 2 Grand Elders in acknowledgement before casually leaving the scene. With his current power, he naturally didn't need to lower his head before these 2 Grand Elders. He had clearly displayed his power in the battle just then. However, Ling Han didn't leave Dark Moon City. The resources of the Ding clan were a huge slice of cake, so he naturally wouldn't leave it to the others. If the Long clan and the Duan clan split the territory of the Ding clan but didn't give him any benefits, If that were the case, their eyes must have been clouded by greed. Sure enough, the two grand elders personally came to visit him after a few days. After some polite chatter, they handed Ling Han a spatial god tool. Ling Han inspected its contents on the spot, and a satisfied smile immediately spread across his face. Chapter 1766. Separation Resentment City. Chapter 1766. Separation Resentment City. Ling Han headed toward Separation Resentment City with Mao Dai. Separation Resentment City was where the Fu clan was located, and Mao Dai had initially planned on joining the Fu clan after reaching the fourth severance. However, after witnessing Ling Han's incredible power, he didn't have any interest in remaining in Dark Moon City anymore. He wanted to join the Fu clan as soon as possible so that he could continue to grow stronger. If one didn't have a flying treasure, then the fastest way to travel around the celestial realm would be by ship. After all, transfer formations were far too expensive and far too difficult to construct. Ling Han couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. As it turned out, the large black dog could also be viewed as a talented dog. Anyhow, he would leave the people from the great Ling Empire in this smaller city of the Black Moon sect. He couldn't look after them forever, so now was a good time for them to gain independence and learn to live by themselves. This was the celestial realm, and there was no such thing as heaven or hell in this realm. Do they truly not exist? Ling Han asked Small Tower. Most definitely not. Small Tower answered with absolute certainty. At this moment, Ling Han was filled with great anticipation. After arriving at the Fu clan, he could start to ask around for the Rock Palace's whereabouts. At that time, he would then be able to set off and look for his friends. After sailing for almost a year, the ship finally arrived at Separation Resentment City. This was an unfathomably large 3-star city that was divided into 4 regions: Heaven Departing City, Separation Reluctant City, Great King City, and Minor King City. Heaven Departing City was the city of the highest level, and only the Fu clan and their subordinate forces were allowed to reside in it. Separation Reluctant City also housed the subordinate forces of the Fu clan, but these forces were far weaker than those in Heaven Departing City. Moreover, their relationship with the Fu clan was also relatively inferior. Meanwhile, Great King City and Minor King City both housed ordinary residents. However, Great King City was slightly higher in level. After all, ordinary residents were also divided into different social classes. Mao Dai was followed by Zhang Chong and Mao Shiyu, while Ling Han was accompanied by the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. The 6 of them settled down in Minor King City before sending someone to report their arrival. Of the 4 cities, only Minor King City could be entered with a payment of star stones. Meanwhile, the 3 other cities all required explicit permission before one could enter. If one were to enter without permission, the guards of the Fu clan weren't standing around for show. After waiting for a few days, Ling Han and the others finally received permission to enter Heaven Departing City. The 4 cities of Separation Resentment City were organized in a top-down manner, with Heaven Departing City naturally situated at the topmost location. In fact, one would need to enter a transfer formation to reach this city. Because the distance wasn't too great, the cost of constructing and maintaining this transfer formation was also relatively acceptable. Otherwise, perhaps only Celestial King tier forces would be able to shoulder the costs of maintaining a transfer formation between 2 3-star cities. After arriving here, Mao Dai bade farewell to Ling Han. Although Mao Dai was a prodigy, he was far inferior when compared to Ling Han. Thus, the 2 of them received extremely different treatment when being recruited by the Fu clan. One day later, Fu Gaoyin excitedly ran over to visit Ling Han. "Brother Ling, you've finally come." He immediately rushed over to give Ling Han a friendly and enthusiastic hug. Ling Han smiled upon seeing Fu Gaoyin. He was an extremely enthusiastic person, and this was in stark contrast to those who were less skilled in expressing themselves. A good example of this was the Empress, who would definitely kill any stranger who dared to embrace her. Anyhow, Fu Gaoyun hadn't let Ling Han down, and he had helped him purchase a huge amount of godly metal. Meanwhile, Ling Han had also seen a huge increase in his wealth recently. In fact, he had obtained almost half of the Ding clan's accumulated wealth. Why half? This was because he had left Dark Moon City, meaning that he couldn't obtain the Ding clan's fixed assets. For example, he couldn't obtain the Ding clan's precious mines. As such, the Long clan and the Duan clan had given him most of the liquid assets. That being the case, Ling Han had almost 100 million star stones at this moment. Judging from this, one could also see just how wealthy these powerful forces were. Moreover, the Ding clan was only a severing, mundane tier clan. Ling Han was about to repay Fu Gaoyun with star stones. Yet Fu Gaoyun didn't care about this at all. After all, he had bought the godly metal on credit. As the future clan leader of the Fu clan, who dared to press him for repayment? "Brother, if you still didn't come, Elder Yen would soon explode," Fu Gaoyun said. This was another reason why he had rushed over so quickly. He needed to take Ling Han to visit Xiang Yen as soon as possible. Otherwise, this great alchemist might directly wreak havoc in the Fu clan. Ling Han laughed heartily upon hearing this, and he followed Fu Gaoyun to visit Xiang Yen. He naturally brought his newly received spatial god tool to the Fu clan as well, and after passing through a stone gate, he arrived before a courtyard. Upon entering this courtyard, he saw that in addition to Xiang Yen, there was also a white-haired elder as well as a beautiful young woman. This woman was truly beautiful. She had a slender body, smooth and jade-like skin, and glossy raven-black hair. However, Fu Gaoyun immediately grimaced upon seeing this young woman. It was as if he wanted to immediately turn around and leave. "Hey, little Yun Yun!" the beautiful young woman exclaimed upon seeing Fu Gaoyun. She wasn't reserved at all, and she seemed even bolder and more straightforward than men. "Why do you always run away when you see me? It's not like I'll stick a rod through your A*S or anything." Upon hearing this, Ling Han immediately understood why Fu Gaoyun was wearing such a sulky expression. This young woman was far too bold. The white-haired elder shook with anger and shouted, "Young lady, why don't you act like a proper woman at all?" He was Situ Tang, and he had finally come to visit today after being pressed by Xiang Yen several times. Meanwhile, that bold young woman was his only granddaughter. She was called Situ Xiaojin, and because her parents had died early, she was Situ Tang's only remaining relative. As such, she was extremely spoiled and pampered by him. However, it was also because of this that she had grown to become the bold woman that she was today. This frustrated him to no end. Situ Xiaojin replied with a simple aha. She didn't dare to publicly retort her grandpa. However, even though she obediently listened to his critiques, she would never end up changing her ways. Fu Gaoyun stepped forward and respectfully bowed to the two great alchemists. "My respects to Elder Yen and Elder Tang." These were the two most high-ranking alchemists of the Fu clan, and they were also the greatest assets of the Fu clan. Thus, they deserved the respect of everyone in the Fu clan. The two alchemists replied with a smile. Xiang Yen then grinned widely as he walked up to Ling Han, saying, "Brat, you've finally come. Come over here. Let me see if your alchemy has improved or not." "Old geezer Yen, why did you drag me over here?" Situ Tang said in irritation. "I'm extremely busy, and I don't have time to **T around with you." Ling Han couldn't help but grimace. He finally understood where Situ Xiaojin had learned her habits from. Meanwhile, Situ Xiaojin was glancing at Ling Han in curiosity. She had seen Xiang Yen many times, yet she had never seen him acting so warm and friendly with anyone before. Xiang Yen humphed before disdainfully saying, "Old geezer Tang, I suggest that you stop wasting your time on the winds and fire's 9 clouds pill." "What? You dare to say that I'm wasting my time? Situ Tang immediately jumped up, continuing, You're the one wasting your time. Your entire family is wasting their time. Just you wait. I'll definitely refine the winds and fire's 9 clouds pill in under 10,000 years. Huh. Xiang Yin chuckled coldly as he tossed a vial towards Situ Tang. He was wearing an apathetic expression, yet he was already jumping around and dancing in joy in his mind. Situ Tang instinctively caught the vial, and he irritatedly asked, What's this for? Open it and see for yourself. Xiang Yin replied with a wave of his hand. How pretentious! Situ Tang said with a scoff. He casually opened the vial, yet his expression instantly underwent a drastic change. This was because he could already smell the fragrance of the alchemical pill. He shuddered upon smelling this, and he immediately exclaimed, Winds and fire's 9 clouds pill! Chapter 1767, Bold Woman. Chapter 1767, Bold Woman. Ha! It's nothing, Xiang Yin purposefully said. He was wearing a fake expression of calm and modesty, as if he didn't want to be congratulated. Meanwhile, Situ Tang was completely stunned. He poured the alchemical pill out before carefully examining and smelling it. His expression became increasingly fervent, and even his beard was starting to shudder. He had already spent billions of years to perfect the ancient pill recipe for the winds and fire's 9 clouds pill. In fact, he had even engaged in numerous arguments with Xiang Yin over the direction of the pill recipe. It was also because of this that they had become opponents and adversaries. He had been extremely confident that he was correct, and he had also been certain that he could definitely succeed in refining the alchemical pill at some point in time. However, who would have thought that his opponent would succeed in refining it before him? Huh, Grandpa Yin, you truly succeeded? Situ Xiaojin asked. She wasn't shocked by this sudden turn of events. Of course. How can your grandpa compare to me? Xiang Yin replied smugly. This was only a friendly competition between him and Situ Tang, and the relationship between them was actually extremely deep. Thus, he treated Situ Xiaojin as if she were his own granddaughter. Situ Xiaojin raised her thumb and said, Grandpa Yin, you're so talented. Situ Tang looked at Xiang Yin as he finally came to his senses and asked, Why you genuinely succeeded? It's naturally because I chose the correct method. Moreover, my alchemy skills are far superior to yours, so I was able to easily refine this pill, Xiang Yin said without any sense of shame. If it weren't for Ling Han's help, he would have definitely still been stumbling around like a headless chook. Situ Tang naturally didn't believe him. After all, he understood Xiang Yin better than Xiang Yin understood himself. The reverse was also true. Under his relentless interrogation, Xiang Yin had no option but to spit out the truth. Situ Tang looked Ling Han up and down. After a while he said, Brat, why don't you become my disciple? Piss off. I found him first. Xiang Yin immediately said, Bullsh *T. Your *TTY skills will only hold him back. It's naturally better if he becomes my disciple. Situ Tang said with a scoff, Just a single hand of mine is more powerful than you. Just a single finger of mine is more powerful than you. Xiang Yin said, unwilling to back down. Just a single fingernail of mine is more powerful than you. Just a single hair of mine is more powerful than you. The two elders glared at each other, and it was as if they were about to break into a fight. They didn't possess the reservedness and dignified aura of great alchemists at all. Let's go. These two old geezers are arguing with each other again. It'll be a dozen or so days before they finally stop. Situ Xiaojin clapped her hands and continued, Hurry up and leave. What are you still standing there in a daze for? Is your A*S feeling itchy? Ling Han glanced at Fu Gaoyin, and Fu Gaoyin also glanced at him. This young woman was even bolder and more vulgar than men. They left the courtyard, and it wasn't long before they heard a series of banging and clanging sounds. It was clear that the two elders had already started fighting. "It's not like you have 3 heads and 6 arms or anything. So why are you so adored by those 2 old geezers?" Situ Xiaojin asked in curiosity. She was wearing the expression of a pervert, and she looked him up and down as if he were a beautiful woman. "Perhaps you have some extraordinary talent." She turned her gaze toward Ling Han's lower body, and it was as if her gaze possessed little hands that were also observing him. Ling Han almost raised his leg to kick her away. This woman had definitely reincarnated into the wrong body. "Brother Fu, didn't you say we were going somewhere just then?" he suddenly said. "Yeah, that's right." Fu Gaoyan hurriedly clapped his hands and said, "I almost forgot about that. Anyway, let's go." The two of them hurriedly turned around to flee. "You're trying to ditch me?" Situ Xiaojin said with a snicker. As she said this, she immediately started to chase after them. However, she couldn't keep up with Ling Han and Fu Gaoyan's speed, so it wasn't long before she completely lost track of them. She stopped in irritation and she murmured, "This city is only so large, and there's no way you can run to the heavens. I'll find you too sooner or later." Fu Gaoyan stopped and said, "Brother Ling, starting from tomorrow, you and your wife can both enter the Heavenly Dragon Academy." "What Heavenly Dragon Academy?" "It's an academy founded by the Fu clan. Apart from members of the Fu clan, this academy also educates the members of some nearby clans. In addition, it also recruits prodigies from other cities," Fu Gaoyan explained. "For example, Black Moon City's Changsanyang. However, because the lowest requirement for recruitment is reaching the severing mundane tier, Changsanyang wasn't able to enter in the beginning. Otherwise, he would have been recruited to the academy long ago." Ling Han nodded in understanding. He then asked, "What about my other wife?" Fu Gaoyan patted his chest and said, "Ha! We naturally have to open the back door for you. Sister Heavenly Phoenix will be enrolled as if she were a member of the Fu clan. She'll definitely reach the severing mundane in under 100 million years." The Fu clan held Ling Han in such high regard not only because of his cultivation talent, but also because of Xiang Yan's adoration toward him. Otherwise, how could the Fu clan break their own rules for a measly severing mundane tier prodigy? Reaching the severing mundane tier in under 100 million years. This wasn't slow. In fact, it could even be regarded as astonishingly quick. However, Ling Han didn't want the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden to perform a normal severance. Otherwise, she could only sever her own mundane relationships. Severing heaven and earth would be far too difficult for her. Perhaps there exists some supreme celestial medicine or celestial pill that can help her sever heaven and earth. Ling Han trusted his own alchemy skills. It didn't matter too much if he couldn't refine such a pill now would eventually be able to refine it. Perhaps he would succeed in doing so when he became a celestial king. Fu Gaoyan waved goodbye. Ling Han retrieved the huge amount of godly metal to feed the divine demon sword, and when all of this godly metal was transformed into scrap metal, the divine demon sword finally advanced to the level of 2-star pseudo-divine metal. Pseudo-divine metal was divided into 10 ranks, and those above the highest rank could be regarded as genuine divine metal. I've almost consumed 2/3 of my wealth. Moreover, it's already so expensive now, so how expensive will it be when I want to raise the divine demon sword to the level of 7-star pseudo-divine metal or 8-star pseudo-divine metal? Ling Han was slightly worried upon thinking of this. At that time, he would need to spend an astronomical amount of star stones. Whatever, that's a problem for the future. As I become more powerful, obtaining wealth should also become easier and easier. The next day, Ling Han set off for the Heavenly Dragon Academy with the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. In order to avoid trouble, the Empress had already concealed her true appearance. However, she was slightly unhappy about this because she was unable to show her beauty to Ling Han at all times. After walking for a while, they arrived at their destination. The Heavenly Dragon Academy was incredibly large. 3-star cities were at least 10 times the size of 2-star cities. Although this city was divided into 4 smaller regions, and although this academy only occupied one corner of Heaven Departing City, the Heavenly Dragon Academy was still as large as the entire Dark Moon City. There were tall mountains in the academy, and there were also large seashores in the academy. The Heavenly Dragon Academy was like a huge standalone city. The gate of the academy was comparatively small, with the 2 gate pillars only measuring 300 meters in height. Moreover, there was only a gate lintel, and there wasn't actually a physical gate door. The pillars were engraved with coiling heavenly dragons, and these dragons looked extremely lively and realistic. Their mouths were also wide open and roaring in fury, and this would make one feel a sense of intense might and pressure. Although there was no physical gate door, this didn't mean that any random person could enter the academy. This was because there existed a formation that blocked anyone who didn't possess the relevant talismans from entering. During his visit yesterday, Fu Gaoyan had already given Ling Han 3 talismans to enter. At this moment, there was seemingly some argument going on before the gate. Ling Han looked over, only to see Mao Dai furiously arguing with a young man. His eyes were burning with anger. "Crawl through my legs or fuck off." Chapter 1768 Humiliation. Chapter 1768 Humiliation. This was an extremely arrogant young man, and he was blocking Mao Dai's path into the Heavenly Dragon Academy. If Mao Dai wanted to enter, he would have to crawl through this young man's legs. However, who was Mao Dai? He was a prodigy, and he was a 3rd Severance Grand Elder. So, how could he endure such humiliation? However, this was the Fu clan's territory, and Mao Dai had only just arrived here. Thus, he couldn't rashly engage in battle. As such, he could only use reason to try to talk his way through. As long as he could resolve this with words, he definitely wouldn't engage in physical battle. "Sir, have I offended you in any way?" Mao Dai asked in a solemn voice. Because he was entering the academy, he was by himself at this moment. Otherwise, as young and energetic as Zhang Chong and Mao Shi were, they would have definitely exploded in anger already. "Ha ha ha ha." The young man laughed wantonly, and there was an expression of disdain on his face. "Is trash like you worthy of offending me?" Mao Dai was even more enraged upon hearing this. However, he forcefully suppressed his anger and said, "Then why are you making things difficult for me?" The young man raised his chin and said, "Because I want to." His expression was filled with provocation and arrogance. Upon hearing that, Mao Dai abandoned all hope of resolving this peacefully. This young man was definitely targeting him on purpose. With this in mind, he immediately roared, "Excuse me." His right hand shot forward, grabbing at the young man's wrist. He was going to toss this young man behind him. "Naive," the young man said with a sneer. He also replied with an attack of his own. Whoa! A ball of flames instantly burst to life in his palm. However, looking closely, this ball of flames was completely different from ordinary flames. It looked like a ball of ghostly flames, and it radiated with an extremely terrifying and chilling aura. Mao Dai didn't wait for this attack to hit him, and he immediately stopped his attack before leaping back in retreat. He was as quick and nimble as a rabbit. "Still trying to escape?" the young man said with a snicker. His hand continued to rapidly shoot at Mao Dai. 4th Severance. Ling Han was slightly astonished upon seeing this. After one reached the severing mundane tier, it would be extremely difficult to determine their specific cultivation level if they didn't release their aura. For example, a 4th Severance Grand Elder would only be able to determine that a 1st Severance Grand Elder was weaker than them. However, they wouldn't be able to determine by how much. Of course, a dividing soul tier cultivator would naturally be able to determine the specific cultivation level of a severing mundane tier cultivator. However, this was relatively meaningless during battle. After all, dividing soul tier cultivators could easily crush severing mundane tier cultivators. As such, what did it matter whether they were at the first severance or fourth severance? Anyhow, this young was actually at the fourth severance. His appearance wasn't old, so it was clear that he had severed the mundane at a relatively young age. Moreover, because those at the severing mundane tier possessed an infinite lifespan, their appearance naturally wouldn't undergo any change. In any case, advancing from the first severance to the fourth severance was no easier than advancing from the Genesis tier to the severing mundane tier. This young man looked like a profligate, yet this was only his external appearance. He had advanced to the severing mundane tier, so could he be a genuine fool? After gaining the upper hand, the young man continued to bear down on Mao Dai. Mao Dai continued to dash around, and it was clear that he had severely underestimated the young man's strength. At this moment, he had already fallen into a huge disadvantage. He was completely unable to break free from the young man's grasp, no matter what he did. This was the overwhelming advantage that fourth severance elites possessed over third severance elites. Fortunately, Mao Dai had performed flawless severances. Even though he couldn't be regarded as a king tier, the young man before him was only an elite who had performed normal severances. That being the case, Mao Dai was only stuck at a huge disadvantage. He wouldn't be defeated anytime soon. After retreating for a while, Mao Dai finally found an opportunity to break free from his disadvantage. He then unleashed his aura and started to battle against the young man. Ling Han observed them for a brief moment before shaking his head. Although Mao Dai had performed flawless severances, he was still one severance weaker than his opponent. In other words, there was a huge gulf between their battle prowess, and it was likely that Mao Dai would fall into a disadvantage again after 100 or so exchanges. After 1,000 or so exchanges, it was likely that he would be comprehensively defeated. Of course, the situation would become more uncertain if Mao Dai unleashed some powerful trump card. "I've underestimated you," the young man said in astonishment. As a fourth severance elite, he had initially thought that he could defeat Mao Dai in just a few simple exchanges. However, there was an unexpectedly huge gulf between those who had performed flawless severances and those who had performed normal severances. Thus, he was still unable to fully suppress Mao Dai. In fact, he was only at the early stage of the fourth severance, while Mao Dai was at the peak stage of the third severance. Moreover, he had also accumulated experience at this cultivation level for an extremely long time. Thus, his battle prowess had already been tempered to an extremely powerful level. If the young man were at the peak stage of the fourth severance, and if Mao Dai were at the early stage of the fourth severance, he would definitely be powerful enough to turn the tables. "Black Jade Hand," the young man roared with a sneer. Whoa. His hands became black, but this wasn't a dark and inky black. Rather, it was a semi-transparent and jade-like black. However, there were also visible black veins in his jade-like hands, and these veins were pulsating with numerous symbols of the Great Tao. Secret technique of the Fu clan Black Jade Hand. Mao Dai also roared as he beat his chest, and a bright red light instantly burst forth from his eyes. His battle prowess rose by a significant amount as he moved to block the Black Jade Hand. Boom! The Black Jade Hand spread open and enveloped the surroundings. This was a crushing attack, and as the Black Jade Hand pressed down, Mao Dai was much like a grasshopper trying to block a cart. His struggle was completely futile. Pum! The earth trembled, and bursts of golden light instantly rose from the ground. However, this tremor quickly died down. The academy was protected by formations, and these formations would automatically activate when they detected powerful shockwaves. The dust settled, and one could see that Mao Dai was still standing. However, his face had already become as white as a sheet, and there was also blood seeping from the corners of his mouth. His eyes were filled with fury. Meanwhile, the young man didn't look to be in a much better situation. This was most likely because the black jade hand had expended much of his energy. However, Mao Dai had definitely suffered heavier wounds than him. After all, he was inferior in cultivation level, and he had just blocked such a powerful attack. "Are you going to crawl or not?" the young man asked as he spread his legs apart and pointed between them. Mao Dai clenched his hands into fists, and the veins on his arms were bulging. He definitely wouldn't accept such humiliation. However, this was his first day at the Heavenly Dragon Academy, so he definitely couldn't be late or missing. Otherwise, how would the teachers of the academy view him? How arrogant and careless would that be? Meanwhile, Ling Han was pondering over how the large black dog would react. If it were him, he would definitely agree without hesitation. While crawling through, he would then bite either the young man's weenie or his bum. He would definitely give the young man all the joy that he could wish for. However, only the large black dog could do such a thing. Ordinary people definitely wouldn't dare to emulate him. They wouldn't have the face to do so. Ling Han flicked his sleeves and strode forward, saying, "What incredible rules! One needs to crawl through a dog flap before entering the academy." The young man faltered upon hearing this. However, he instantly flared up in rage when he came to his senses. "Dog flap. In other words, you're calling me a dog? Phut!" "Ling Han," the young man asked. His gaze became piercing, and an expression of ridicule spread across his face. Ling Han was slightly astonished. Since when had he become so famous in the Fu clan? He nodded and replied, "Indeed, your grandpa is none other than me, Ding Xiaochen." If Ding Xiaochen still had a spirit after death, he would definitely spit a mouthful of blood upon hearing this. How many times did Ling Han want to impersonate him? The young man was enraged upon hearing this. "My grandpa definitely isn't as young as you." However, he forcefully suppressed his anger and said in a solemn voice, "I'm Fu Zhengtong. I've never heard of you before. Which small fry are you?" Ling Han said with a wave of his hand. He didn't give the young man any face at all. The young man had treated Mao Dai with such disrespect, so Ling Han was naturally feeling extremely unhappy with him. "I've always heard that you were extremely arrogant." "Sure enough, you're as arrogant as can be," Fu Jingtong said coldly. Chapter 1769, Caught in the Crossfire. Chapter 1769, Caught in the Crossfire. Always heard? Heard from whom? Ling Han gazed at the young man and said, "Oh, I seem to be fairly famous." "I'm not praising you." Fu Zhengtong couldn't help but shout. For some reason, he was easily triggered by Ling Han. "Who's always talking about me?" Ling Han asked with a smile. Fu Zhengtong chuckled coldly. He then stared at Ling Han for a while before answering. "The holy son of the lunar sect, Bei Xianming." Ling Han involuntarily said a silent "oh" in his mind. There was no such thing as random love in this world, and there was similarly no such thing as random hate. Even a profligate disciple like Fu Jingtong wouldn't randomly block the entrance to the academy for no good reason. However, if he were an acquaintance of Bei Xianming, then everything would make perfect sense. Bei Xianming had suffered at the hands of Ling Han before, so he was now encouraging Fu Jingtong to block the gate to the academy. As for Mao Dai, he was simply someone who had been caught in the crossfire. Anyhow, it was unclear whether Fu Jingtong had decided to have some fun first, or he had purposely targeted Mao Dai because he knew about his good relationship with Ling Han. In any case, Mao Dai had definitely been dragged into this mess by Ling Han. Ling Han rubbed his nose upon thinking of this. Since this was the case, he would simply beat Fu Jingtong to exact revenge for Mao Dai. This was only a beating, so it wouldn't matter too much, right? To say nothing of his relationship with Fu Gaoyan. Just his relationship with the two great alchemists was enough for him to act arrogantly in the Fu clan. Of course, this arrogance naturally came with a limit. "Are you Bei Xuanming's lackey?" he asked with a smile. "He was pummeled by me. Yet he doesn't dare to challenge me face to face, so he encouraged trash like you to cause trouble for me? Trash! Fu Jingtong almost jumped up in fury. He was a member of the Fu clan. What did this mean? This meant that everyone in the surrounding 10,000 or so cities would need to respectfully refer to him as Young Master Tong, even if they were dividing soul-tier elites. You have no background, and you've only just advanced to the severing mundane tier. Yet, you actually dare to act so wantonly before me? Ling Han, do you think you can act arrogantly and wantonly just because you have the support of Fu Gaoyin? Fu Zhengtong asked with a cold chuckle. There was a strong sense of disdain in his voice. However, his eyes suddenly lit up when he saw the arriving Empress and Heavenly Phoenix, Divine Maiden. More precisely, it was because he had seen the Empress, although the Heavenly Phoenix, Divine Maiden was also stunningly beautiful. One could still find around 10 similarly beautiful women in any one city. Moreover, she hadn't reached the severing mundane tier yet, so she wasn't overly attractive to Fu Jingtong. However, the Empress was completely different. Although her true appearance was concealed, her figure was far too shapely and perfect, combined with her mysterious and noble aura, as well as her severing mundane tier cultivation. Fu Jingtong's heart instantly started to thump in excitement. With his power and status, he didn't only consider a woman's appearance and figure when he toyed with them. More of the time, he would focus on their aura, disposition, status, and cultivation level. When taking a female companion, those at the Genesis tier would be nothing more than mere decoration. However, a female companion at the severing mundane tier would be completely different. Everyone would be envious. For example, Fu Jingtong was extremely envious of Ling Han right now. This was because even he didn't have a severing, mundane tier Dao partner. Oh, Ling Han replied. So, Fu Gaoyin isn't the successor of the Fu clan. He's only one of the potential successors. Fu Jingtong said in disdain. Oh, so you're another potential successor then? Ling Han said with a chuckle. He was naturally saying this to mock Fu Jingtong. He hadn't even performed flawless severances, so the Fu clan would definitely be mocked to death if someone like him were to become the future clan leader of the Fu clan. However, Fu Jingtong wasn't enraged upon hearing this. Instead, he said with an expression of yearning, I naturally don't have the right to become a potential successor. However, young Master Hai does. He's the future hope of the Fu clan. If Fu Gaoyin, trash who only knows how to play instruments, becomes the future clan leader of the Fu clan, then it will be utter humiliation for the entire clan. By the looks of it, the Fu clan was also divided into many different factions. Moreover, the position of clan leader was far too attractive, so much so that it caused division between the clan members. Everyone supported their own leader. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. Fu Jingtong hadn't come here to target him simply because of the animosity between him and Bei Xianming. It was also because he had become far too friendly with Fu Gaoyin. As such, he was being targeted by the faction of young Master Hai. As it turned out, he was also someone who was caught in the crossfire. Mao Dai had been caught in the crossfire because of him, and he had been caught in the crossfire because of Fu Gaoyin. I don't care about the Fu clan's internal matters. I don't care about who becomes the clan leader of the Fu clan, either. Ling Han shook his head and continued, However, since you've provoked me, I can't let this slide unless I give you a beating. Ha ha ha. You're only a measly first severance cultivator. Who do you think you are? Fu Zhengtong roared with laughter. Did this person truly think that he could act wantonly just because he was slightly more talented? Ling Han grinned and said, Why speak so much nonsense? Hurry up and fight me. It's my hobby to pummel people like you. Impudence! Fu Zhengtong roared. He immediately charged forward to attack Ling Han. Boom! Countless regulations erupted from his body, transforming into lengths of black chain that arched up into a net that looked much like a hunting spider. Ling Han, dashed forward to meet Fu Jingtong's attack. The Empress' battle prowess was slightly inferior to his, and at this moment she could only rival elites at the third severance. She couldn't rival those at the fourth severance. However, if she advanced to the peak stage of the second severance, she would most likely be able to rival those at the early stage of the fourth severance. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden naturally couldn't rival those at the severing mundane tier. Ling Han reached over, and he immediately grabbed one of the chains of regulations. With a powerful pull, Fu Zhengtong couldn't help but stumble forward. Meanwhile, Ling Han borrowed this momentum to dash forward, throwing a punch as he did so. Fu Zhengtong was greatly astonished. It looked like Ling Han was grabbing a chain, yet in reality he was actually grabbing onto regulations. The Great Tao was formless, so how could it be grabbed? Moreover, this had caused a backlash to strike his body, making him involuntarily stumble. Ling Han was an absolute freak. Second severance. Fu Zhengtong yelped in astonishment. Since Ling Han had unleashed his aura, he could naturally determine Ling Han's cultivation level. What kind of first severance was this? If this was the first severance, then he would hack his head off and use it as a football. That fucking Bei Xianming was far too unreliable, and he had even said that Ling Han had only just advanced to the severing mundane tier in the severing mundane pool. He had clearly advanced to the second severance there. Perhaps Ling Han had advanced from the first severance to the second severance in these past few years? Even if he were beaten to death, Fu Jingtong would still refuse to believe this. After all, did this make any sense? However, he quickly composed himself, saying, "So what if you're at the second severance?" There was disdain on his face, and he immediately raised his fist to throw another punch at Ling Han. Even king tiers were only invincible against those at the same cultivation level. For example, king tiers who had reached the peak stage of the second severance could indeed surpass the barrier in cultivation level and rival those at the early stage of the third severance. However, they would definitely be pummeled by those at the middle stage of the third severance. Right now, Fu Jingtong was at the early stage of the fourth severance, so what did it matter even if Ling Han were a king tier at the peak stage of the second severance? Before Fu Jingtong, he was nothing but trash. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle and say, "You're the one who's faltering and being astonished. Yet you're also the one who's saying that there's nothing wrong. It's such a shame that you're not an actor. It's an absolute waste of your talent." Pung! Their fists collided, and both of them instantly stumbled back in retreat. After stabilizing themselves, they couldn't help but stumble back several more steps. Only then were they finally able to completely stabilize themselves. They were evenly matched in this exchange. An expression of astonishment spread across Fu Jingtong's face. This was far too terrifying. Ling Han was only at the second severance, yet he was already able to rival him? Although he was only at the early stage of the fourth severance, he should have still been far more powerful than Ling Han, who was only at the peak stage of the second severance at most. Fuck! What kind of freak is he? Chapter 1770. Might of the Divine Demon Sword. Chapter 1770. Might of the Divine Demon Sword. Fu Zhengtong refused to believe this. He didn't dare to believe this. This had shattered the iron rules of the cultivation world, and it was something that should have been completely impossible to achieve. He had definitely made a mistake. His opponent was actually at the third severance. Yes, he was actually at the peak stage of the third severance. What a sneaky brat. You're clearly at the third severance, yet you've purposefully practiced some cultivation technique to manipulate your aura and trick your opponents. Fu Zhengtong said through clenched teeth. This kind of person was truly far too detestable. They didn't focus on raising their cultivation, and they instead relied on these evil little trickeries. Ling Han was astounded. Fu Zhengtong was far too skilled at speaking absolute bullsh*t. "You're nothing but a frog that sits at the bottom of a well," Ling Han said. He couldn't be bothered arguing with him anymore. He raised his fists and unleashed more of his battle prowess. "Suppress!" Fu Zhengtong roared. He immediately composed himself. Their battle prowess was almost identical, so now it was a battle between whose celestial technique was more powerful. As a member of the Fu clan, how could he lose to this country bumpkin? Boom! 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 They collided again, with both of them unleashing waves of celestial techniques. At the same time, regulations transformed into spears and chains that whistled through the sky and shook the earth. Fortunately, there were formations protecting the academy and its surroundings. As such, it would be extremely difficult to damage the surroundings. Even so, the surrounding earth was still filled with lumps and craters, making it look like a pockmarked face. Ling Han had to admit that those at the fourth severance were indeed extremely powerful, even though Fu Zhengtong was only at the early stage of the fourth severance, and even though he had only performed normal severances, he could still manage to rival Ling Han's battle prowess. Ling Han was sighing in emotion. However, if passers-by witnessed this battle, their eyes would definitely bulge out in disbelief. "You're only at the fucking second severance." Sure enough, because this was the entrance to the academy where people continued to enter and exit. It wasn't long before people noticed the battle between Ling Han and Fu Jingtong. They couldn't help but walk over to spectate. Of course, some of them also noticed the Empress, and they couldn't help but continue to glance over at her. However, even the Empress' stunning figure couldn't hold their gazes for too long. This was because they discovered that Ling Han was only at the second severance. This was far too astonishing. How could a cultivator at the second severance be so powerful? If he reached the fourth severance, then wouldn't he be able to rival those at the dividing soul tier? They were so stunned that even the Empress' charisma seemed weaker than normal. Of course, this was also because the Empress had concealed her true appearance. Otherwise, even the presence of a celestial king tier elite might not attract as much attention as her. Fight, fight, fight! Ling Han unleashed his full power. Being weaker by 2 minor levels, he finally found an opponent he could battle against without restraint. Otherwise, even king tiers at the third severance would be comprehensively suppressed by him. Only those at the peak stage might be able to rival him. He became increasingly enthusiastic. Meanwhile, Fu Jingtong started to feel increasingly apprehensive. After all, Ling Han didn't seem like he was at the third severance, no matter how he looked at him. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Had he been screwed over by Bei Xianming? Bei Xianming hadn't said that Ling Han had defeated him. Instead, he had only said that Ling Han had offended him, and that Ling Han was far too friendly with Fu Gaoyan. Upon hearing this, young Master Hai had casually said that he would give Ling Han a lesson. Now, however, who was giving whom a lesson? Yet their battle had already reached such a stage, so Fu Jingtong naturally couldn't give up and retreat. Instead, he definitely had to achieve victory. Otherwise, what face would he have? He opened his mouth and spat out a miniature sword that started to expand in the air. This sword then eventually transformed into an azure blade, 3 feet long, that was engraved with snake-like patterns. Fu Zhengtong immediately imbued his origin power into the blade. Wang! The sword instantly lit up, releasing numerous projections of giant snakes that started to hiss at Ling Han. Defeat him! Fu Zhengtong roared as he slashed his sword at Ling Han. Xiao, xiao, xiao! The giant snakes slithered through the air to attack Ling Han. You think only you have a pseudo-celestial tool? Ling Han asked. He immediately unsheathed his divine demon sword. Coincidentally, he had just raised the toughness of this sword to the level of 2-star pseudo-celestial tool. As such, now was a good time to test its might. Wang! The divine demon's sword shuddered slightly, yet it didn't unleash any rays of brilliant light. In fact, not even symbols of the great Tao materialized on the blade of the sword. At a glance, this looked like an incredibly ordinary sword. In fact, Ling Han had already erased all of the saintly patterns that had previously existed on the sword. After all, those saintly patterns were nothing more than imperfections to the current divine demon sword. The divine demon sword looked as ordinary as could be, yet when Ling Han slashed down, it released bursts of sword light that illuminated the sky. At the same time, countless bursts of sword chi surged forth, and it was as if they wanted to shatter the entire sky. Pa, 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 pa. The projections of the giant snakes were immediately obliterated by the countless bursts of sword chi. However, the bursts of sword chi didn't dissipate, and they instead continued to slash at the nearby Fu Jingtong. What? Fu Jingtong was completely astounded. He had retrieved his pseudo-celestial tool to settle victory and defeat in one resolute attack. Yet who would have thought that the country bumpkin would also retrieve a pseudo-celestial tool? Moreover, Ling Han's pseudo-celestial tool was even more powerful than his. He frantically shot back in retreat. The bursts of sword chi from the divine demon sword were far too terrifying. In fact, they were powerful enough to easily slice through his flesh, although they weren't powerful enough to kill him, who would want to suffer severe wounds for no good reason. Just then, they had still been evenly matched. However, with the addition of the divine demon sword, the battle instantly started to become one-sided. In just a dozen or so exchanges, Fu Jingtong was severely wounded by sword chi, with blood gushing from his wounds. Being cut by the divine demon sword was definitely no joke. Moreover, Fu Jingtong had only been cut by the sword chi. If he had been cut by the actual divine demon sword, he would have been dead already. Fu Jingtong retreated for at least 50 kilometers before coming to a stop. Meanwhile, he continued to stare at Ling Han, who was still standing in the distance. At this moment, he had truly lost all face. He had initially wanted to teach Ling Han a lesson, yet it was now him who was being taught a lesson. Moreover, this had been witnessed by countless people. If word of this got back to young Master Hai, perhaps he would even be scolded and fall out of favor. After all, young Master Hai didn't need trash. However, should he continue to fight against Ling Han? Forget about it. He didn't want to get pummeled. Meanwhile, the spectators were all engaged in spirited discussions before the gate of the academy. They didn't know who Ling Han was, so they were all speculating about his background. Lord Mao. Ling Han said in greeting and nodded at Mao Dai. Mao Dai sighed with emotion. Back then, he had even wanted to take Ling Han as his disciple. Now, however, Ling Han's cultivation level was only a single severance lower than his. In terms of battle prowess, Ling Han had more so surpassed him by a significant amount. He could barely accept this reality. Don't call me Lord anymore. I'm not the commander of the Dark Moon Army anymore, and your battle prowess is also superior to mine, Mao Dai said with a serious expression. When cultivators communicated with each other, strength was of utmost importance. Thus, Mao Dao felt extremely uncomfortable when Ling Han referred to him using such an unfitting title. Ling Han didn't insist anymore, and he said, "Then I'll call you Brother Mao." Mao Dai nodded upon hearing this. However, just as he was about to enter the academy with Ling Han, he suddenly saw someone walking out. This person was none other than Fu Gaoyan. "Brother Ling, I heard that you got into a fight?" Fu Gaoyan looked around, and he asked, "Where's your opponent?" "Where are they?" "The fight's over," Ling Han replied with a smile. "Over so quickly? I wasn't even able to enjoy the show." "Oh, that's right. You're far too good at causing trouble. How did you get into a fight on your first day at the academy?" Fu Gaoyan asked teasingly. Ling Han rolled his eyes and replied, "Isn't this all thanks to you? Anyway, how many potential successors does the Fu clan have? Why are you suddenly asking this?" Fu Gaoyun asked in slight curiosity. "The person I was fighting with just then was called Fu Jingtong. He said that young Master Hai or something wanted to teach me a lesson. He also told me not to be friends with a weak person like you anymore." "What? Fu Gaoyun exclaimed in astonishment. You were fighting with Fu Jingtong. Heavens, that was a fourth Severance elite. Chapter 1771, Show of Strength. Chapter 1771, Show of Strength. After some thorough questioning, Ling Han finally learned that there was indeed more than one potential successor in the Fu clan. In reality, 3-star forces and above would all raise more than one potential successor. Otherwise, what would they do if their successor suddenly died one day? At that time, how long would it take to raise another successor? Generally speaking, these forces would raise around 4 to 5 potential successors at any one time. When it came to top-notch great sects, they would more so raise 10 or more potential successors at once. These forces were extremely wealthy, and they also possessed astounding power and potential. Thus, it was only natural that they raised numerous potential successors. Moreover, having several potential successors would also push them to compete with each other, and thus raise their own strength and abilities. This would in turn allow them to become even more impressive and outstanding. For example, the lunar sect had 7 potential successors, with Bei Xianming being only one of them. His desire to become Dao partners with Fu Shaoyan was also partly because he wanted the support of the Fu clan, as this would help him solidify his spot as a holy son. After all, the position of potential successor wasn't guaranteed. If someone more outstanding were to appear, the weakest of the 7 potential successors would be immediately demoted. They wouldn't need to wait until the previous sect leader retired. Regarding the Fu clan, because they were inferior to the lunar sect even though they were both 3-star forces, they also had fewer potential successors than the lunar sect. Right now, they only had 4 potential successors. Apart from Fu Gaoyun and Young Master, also known as Fu Tonghe, there was also Fu Xiuping and Fu Bingbing. Among them, Fu Gaoyun was the newest potential successor as he had replaced the original and weakest potential successor. Meanwhile, Fu Shaoyun also had the potential to become a successor, and it was because of this that some members of the clan wanted to marry her out. If she married into the lunar sect, she naturally couldn't become a potential successor of the Fu clan anymore. Right now, there was a huge gulf between the cultivation levels of the 4 potential successors. For example, the most powerful Fu Xiuping had already reached the dividing soul tier. Moreover, he was a heaven soul elite. Of course, he had already cultivated for an astonishingly long time. In fact, he had already cultivated for over 10 billion years. After him was Fu Bingbing. She was an earth soul elite, and even though she had cultivated for a shorter period of time compared to Fu Xiuping, she had still already cultivated for a whopping 8 billion or so years. Fu Tonghai was far younger than them, and he had only cultivated for around 1 billion years. He had just advanced to the dividing soul tier, and he had also been the most supported potential successor in the past. However, following Fu Gaoyun's sudden promotion, his popularity and support were instantly faced with a huge threat. Fu Gaoyun was more talented than him, although it wasn't by much. However, picking the clan leader was a task of picking the most talented among the talented. As such, any advantage in talent was naturally extremely valuable. Thus, the conflict between Fu Tonghai and Fu Gaoyun was by far the most intense. According to the rules of the Fu clan, potential successors couldn't directly fight with each other. Otherwise, it would be far too unfair. However, they could rely on their followers to compete with each other. In the past, Fu Tonghai had enjoyed the most support, so he naturally had the most followers as well. Meanwhile, Fu Gaoyun had only been promoted not long ago, so he had far fewer supporters than Fu Tonghai. Moreover, his supporters were also far weaker than Fu Tonghai's supporters. Fortunately, the cultivation level of their followers was strictly limited to the severing, mundane tier. This was to ensure fairness, and it was also because dividing soul tier elites could already be regarded as powerful beings in 3-star forces. Thus, how could they become the followers of these youths? Of course, since Fu Xiuping had already been a potential successor for so long, some of his earliest followers had already advanced to the dividing soul tier. In this case, they were allowed to remain as his followers. It was just that they couldn't participate in the conflicts between followers anymore. Upon hearing Fu Gaoyun's explanation, Ling Han realized that he had unknowingly charged headfirst into another complicated conflict. If Fu Gaoyun hadn't recruited him, he wouldn't have faced any problem at all. Now, however, he had attracted the attention of Fu Tonghai. Perhaps he had also attracted the attention of Fu Xiaobing and Fu Bingbing. Most importantly, the Fu clan didn't allow their members to directly fight with each other. However, he was an outsider, so who knew whether someone would find him annoying and attempt to kill him? Was he truly a magnet for trouble? Fu Gaoyun tugged at Ling Han's arm with a smile and said, "Come, I'll introduce you to a few friends." This academy was as large as a planet, so the residential areas for the students were also as extravagant as could be. Fu Gaoyun led Ling Han and his 3 companions to a courtyard that was situated on a mountainside and next to a limpid river. As they entered, they were immediately welcomed by servants. Upon entering the courtyard, they saw that there was currently a gathering being held here. There were a dozen or so people drinking tea and conversing. When they saw Fu Gaoyun, they immediately stood up to greet him. "Come, let me introduce these 4 friends to everyone. This is Ling Han, Brother Ling. These 2 celestial maidens are Brother Ling's Tao partners, and this over here is Mao Dai, Brother Mao." Fu Gaoyun briefly introduced Ling Han and his 3 companions. "Brother Ling, Brother Mao," the people said in greeting and clasped their hands. As for the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, they simply nodded at them in acknowledgement. After all, they were Ling Han's wives, so they couldn't act too familiar with them. Ling Han and Mao Dai also clasped their hands in greeting. They were being treated with respect, so they naturally had to respond with respect as well. "It seems like young Master Yin holds you in extremely high regard, hey?" a young man who was holding a teacup said. His eyes were fixed on Ling Han, and he continued, "Come, I'll use tea as wine and give a toast to Brother Ling." He was feeling slightly bitter at this moment. This was because Fu Gaoyun had personally gone to invite Ling Han and his companions. Moreover, since Ling Han was with his wives, it was clear that he was the person being invited by Fu Gaoyun. What right did he have to enjoy this treatment? The corners of Ling Han's lips curled up into a slight smile. He truly didn't care about who became the clan leader of the Fu clan. However, if anyone dared to provoke him, he definitely wouldn't show any mercy, either. He was just about to raise his cup and punish the young man, yet the Empress suddenly reached over to stop him. "You don't have the right to enjoy tea with my husband," the Empress said. Her slender hand pushed forward, and it was as quick and powerful as lightning. The young man's expression instantly changed. He hurriedly raised his other hand to block, yet he was no match for the Empress at all. Tea sprayed from his cup and drenched his entire face. Who told him to have bad intentions? He said that he was toasting Ling Han, yet he actually wanted to target and embarrass Ling Han. Everyone was slightly surprised upon seeing this. This young man was called Jin Jiu, and he was a junior of the Jin clan, a subordinate clan of the Fu clan. His cultivation talent was decent, and he had a chance to become a pillar of the Jin clan in the future. When competing for the position of clan leader, Fu Gaoyun and the others didn't only compete for the support of those in the Fu clan, they also competed for the support of those in the subordinate forces. Meanwhile, these subordinate forces would also seize this opportunity to raise their own status if they picked the right person. Their status would definitely rise by a significant amount. However, if they picked the wrong person, their fate would definitely be miserable. As the saying went, each leader would reshuffle their own subordinates. Jin Jiu was at the peak stage of the second severance. Although he hadn't performed flawless severances, his severances weren't much weaker than a flawless severance. In fact, he was only slightly weaker than Fu Gaoyun. However, he was still completely no match for the Empress. This was quite scary. Even Fu Gaoyun hadn't expected this. He knew that the Empress was powerful, yet this was far too powerful, no. Haha, we're all a family, so there's no need to ruin the friendly atmosphere, he hurriedly said. These were all his followers, so he naturally couldn't allow them to become hostile with each other. Otherwise, how would he compete against the other potential successors? Jin Jiu finally came to his senses, and there was a hint of fear in his eyes as he glanced at the Empress. With just a single exchange, he already knew that he was far inferior to the Empress. The gulf between them was far too huge, so much so that it couldn't be surmounted even if he used his trump cards. With this show of strength, everyone instantly became friendly and enthusiastic. In reality, cultivators were fairly realistic people, and they would immediately become obedient if they were beaten enough times. Everyone conversed as they drank tea, and they also exchanged their understandings of cultivation. At this moment, someone said, "Young Master Yin, why don't you play a few pieces for us?" Fu Gaoyun's expression instantly darkened. Chapter 1772, Playing a Piece. Chapter 1772, Playing a Piece. Fu Gaoyun enjoyed music, and this was something that everyone was aware of. Thus, it was also extremely easy for his followers to flatter him. They simply needed to ask him to play a few pieces, and this would definitely delight Fu Gaoyun to no end. However, now was different. After being led astray by Ling Han, Fu Gaoyun seldom played his guqin anymore. This was because he would involuntarily recall descending lotus flowers each time he tried to play a piece. In the end, he would go completely astray and start playing the descending lotus flowers instead. As a young master of the Fu clan, how could he play such a tasteless piece? Thus, asking him to play a piece or two wasn't flattering him anymore. Instead, it was offending him. "Yeah, that's right. Young Master Yin, why don't you play a piece of two?" someone else said in encouragement. How could they know about the trauma in Fu Gaoyun's mind? Thus, they all started to encourage him to play a few pieces. Fu Gaoyun couldn't withstand their enthusiasm, so he could only retrieve his guqin and forcefully calm himself down. Many days had passed, and with his powerful mindset, he had naturally walked out from that crooked path already. However, the condition was that he didn't think of Ling Han. Otherwise, his tune would definitely go astray again. "I won't think about it. I won't think about it." He closed his eyes and placed his fingers onto the guqin. Clear and spring-like sounds instantly flowed out from his instrument. Objectively speaking, Fu Gaoyun was indeed extremely talented in music. Of course, this was fairly inevitable. After all, having lived long enough and having enough talent, what couldn't one become skilled at as long as they put in the effort? Everyone swayed their head in intoxication. Regardless of whether they truly enjoyed music or not, they definitely had to act as if they did at this moment. Meanwhile, Ling Han yawned in boredom. He didn't have a single artistic bone in his body, and if he had the spare time, he would rather cultivate or research alchemy than waste his time listening to music. He smiled at the Empress and the heavenly phoenix, divine maiden, and a mischievous thought was already forming in his mind. He extended a finger and started to lightly tap the teacup before him. This was none other than the tune of descending lotus flowers. This sound was extremely soft, yet almost everyone present was at the severing mundane tier. As such, how could they not hear it? However, most of them didn't mind, as the sound was truly very soft. Yet, it was a completely different situation for Fu Gaoyun. His eyes were closed, and his mind was completely focused. To him, listening to himself playing the guqin was a great source of enjoyment. At this moment, however, a familiar tune suddenly crept into his mind. Descending lotus flowers. There was a ring, and the tune of his piece immediately started to change. Fu Gaoyun almost choked upon hearing this. "No, I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to listen." He hurriedly repeated this in his mind. Yet the more he repeated it, the clearer that faint sound became. In the end, it transformed into a roaring river that surged through his mind. In the end, his fingers also started to go astray, and he started to play descending lotus flowers instead. Everyone faltered upon hearing this, and they couldn't help but exchange confused glances. They could all see the puzzlement and awkwardness in each other's eyes. What in the world was young Master Yun playing? Why did it sound like the story of a beggar? Forget about it. Forget about it, Fu Gaoyun said. He finally came to his senses, and he immediately pushed his guqin away. His expression was as if he had endured great humiliation. Meanwhile, everyone else was wearing strange expressions. They wanted to laugh, yet they didn't dare to. They wanted to speak, yet they also didn't dare to. They felt as stifled as could be. Ha 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 ha. However, Ling Han immediately roared with laughter. He was the culprit, and he also dared to admit that he was the culprit. Facing Ling Han, Fu Gaoyun could only shake his head in exasperation. "What's so enjoyable?" a young man asked as he walked over. He was stumbling a little, and his steps were slightly uneven. "Brother Cheng," everyone immediately said in greeting. This person was Cheng Zhong, a member of the Cheng clan, one of the most powerful subordinate clans of the Fu clan. Thus, Cheng Zhong's support was incredibly important to Fu Gaoyun. Of course, it was still difficult to say who would become the next clan leader of the Cheng clan. It wasn't necessarily certain that Cheng Zhong would become the future clan leader. Because of the Cheng clan's power, it was only natural that everyone treated Cheng Zhong with respect. In fact, even Fu Gaoyun had to give him face. "Cheng Zhong, what's wrong?" Fu Gaoyun asked casually. Cheng Zhong shook his head and replied, "Don't mention it. I was bitten by a dog." "What?" Everyone almost spat out a mouthful of tea upon hearing this. After all, this was far too ridiculous. What was Cheng Zhong's cultivation level? He was at the middle stage of the fourth severance. At the same time, he was also the most powerful follower of Fu Gaoyun. However, an elite such as him had actually been bitten by a dog? If word of this spread, they would definitely be mocked to death. Meanwhile, Ling Han wore a strange expression upon hearing this. Why did this sound so familiar? How is that possible? Fu Gaoyun asked in astonishment. However, he immediately saw the funny side of this, and he asked, "You're so powerful, so how could you have been bitten by a dog?" Sigh. Cheng Zhong sighed loudly before saying, "I don't know what happened, either. I came across Fu Zhengtong when I was heading over, and seeing him running away in disarray, I casually asked how a dog like him had been wounded. However, a large black dog suddenly leaped out from nowhere, and it viciously bit at my bum. It bloody hurt like hell." Everyone was astonished upon hearing this. He had been bitten just like that. He was at the fourth severance. With this information, Ling Han could already confirm that this was the act of none other than the large black dog. Strange. Why had that detestable dog suddenly run over here? Whom did it want to screw over now? When did such a beast appear in the heaven-departing city? Fu Gaoyun asked in puzzlement. Did some powerful being obtain a new immortal beast pet, but not eliminate its wild tendencies yet? No. Cheng Zhong said with a shake of his head. That large black dog was even wearing a pair of iron underwear, and it was so dazzling that it almost blinded me. It was a horrible sight. Pooh! Someone finally couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of tea. "Come, sit over here and calm down first," Fu Gaoyun said. It was hard to seek revenge after being bitten by a dog. After all, they couldn't go over to bite the dog, could they? Cheng Zhong hurriedly shook his hands and said, "No need, no need." How would he dare to sit? His bum was hurting like crazy. Everyone grinned in their minds. This was a fairly hilarious encounter. Of course, it was a miserable encounter for the person who was involved. I've gathered everyone here today not only to touch base, but also to discuss an important matter. Fu Gaoyun raised his hand and signified for silence. The Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm is about to open, and we need to determine who's going to enter. Everyone's eyes lit up at the mention of the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm. This was most likely the ruins of some ancient great sect. When discovered in the past, there had even been a piece of divine metal inside, and this had triggered an earth-shattering battle between 3 celestial king tier forces. From that point onward, no other rare treasures had appeared in the hidden dragon mystery realm, but some powerful forces would still occasionally send some people over to try their luck. However, such situations were relatively rare. To the Fu clan, however, the hidden dragon mystery realm was an incredibly important resource. This was because the hidden dragon mystery realm produced a kind of matter called blood dragon stones. These blood dragon stones were extremely helpful in raising the cultivation level of those at the severing mundane tier, and they could even strengthen one's divine sense and help them build a solid foundation for advancing to the dividing soul tier. From time to time, they would also find some lost cultivation techniques and celestial techniques in this mystery realm. Once perfected, these cultivation techniques and celestial techniques could potentially even reach the level of the Immortal Palace tier or Ascending Origin tier. These were incredibly freakish techniques. Anyhow, because of the earth-shattering battle that had occurred inside the Hidden Dragon Mystery Realm, there were currents of extremely terrifying auras suffusing the entire mystery realm. However, once every 30 million years, a volcano inside the mystery realm would erupt, temporarily suppressing the wild and terrifying auras. During this time, cultivators would be able to enter. Moreover, apart from lava, this volcano also produced blood dragon stones. Even so, one would still need to wear outer garments that were specially made from scraps of blood dragon stones if they wanted to safely enter the hidden dragon mystery realm. Otherwise, their fate could only be death. However, these outer garments were extremely rare, and their effects would also weaken with the passing of time. Thus, they were essentially single-use items. That being the case, only a limited number of people were allowed to enter the hidden dragon mystery realm.